Chapter 1487. Daz could vaguely see Fish Ball Chong's expression on its face. The main reason was that its hair volume had broken through the sky at this moment. Daz couldn't help but feel gratified. As for this guy's gaze at this moment, Daz had subconsciously ignored it. There was an unprecedented ferocity in his dark eyes, but Taisetsu did not care. Instead, he extended his finger and pointed behind him. He left the mouth with sharp teeth and turned slightly and dodged at the same time. A beam of light shot towards him. The light came from the 10 vortexes in the sky. The King Hun had been stabbed in the chest and torn apart, but the 10 vortexes in the sky did not disappear because of that. Attila, the King Hun, was not really dead. The King Hun who had stolen the power of the gods in the original subworld had 10 incarnations. This was equivalent to comparing the King Hun to other people. Apart from the original body, the King Hun also had 10 incarnations. To kill him, one would need to kill him at least 11 times. This was also why the King Hun could still jump around in the organization of Transcendence despite his vile personality. However, the King Hun's 2 incarnations, Herculean Bull and Camel, had been directly destroyed by Taisetsu. Later on, his original body was directly torn apart. Now, in the 10 vortexes there were at most 8 incarnations left. His power could no longer reach its peak state, and it would be difficult for him to recover. His power, after this, had been directly knocked down by a level. Just like the super beings in these cracks, losing external objects was not an unresolvable hatred, but when one's power was damaged to such an extent, it was not something that could be skipped by a simple mediation. Trash will always be trash. The King Hun's figure was nowhere to be seen, and only his voice could be heard. It was coming from the 10 vortexes at once, but it was uneven. Clearly, the King Hun could not even maintain the unity of his incarnations at the moment. His rage had reached an unimaginable level. Taisetsu could not be bothered with the King Hun's stubbornness. With a wave of his hand, the 2 materialized giant swords of light shattered and dispersed, before he found a place with good scenery and sat down. Yudanqiang, or rather, it was born from hundreds of primordial void demons, and was now extraordinarily dangerous. Still, Taisetsu had cut down so many primordial void demons, and none of them gave him such a sense of danger. What did he actually buy? Taisetsu could not help complaining, shaking his head as he glanced at the parchment scroll. Can the boss really understand this thing? On the other hand, the King Hun did not really attack Taisetsu despite his rage. The newcomer of the organization was clearly at the level of a senior member. Such newcomers had only appeared once or twice in history, and he had been careless this time. On the other hand, Yudanqiang, the valiant and prideful King Hun, was unwilling to admit that a piece of trash that he had played as he pleased could now stand against him. Trash. I'll break all your bones and fix you with steel needles, turning you into a specimen. This king, I'll torture you for 1,000 years. The 10 whirlpools started to spin crazily, except for the whirlpools of the dead Herculean Bull and Camel, which were slightly dim. The other 8 whirlpools were filled with lightning and thunder, as if they were brewing a terrifying power. At this moment, in the face of the 10 great whirlpools' abnormalities, it slowly raised its head, its pitch-black eyes sizing up these whirlpools without a trace of fear on its face. Suddenly, the wings on its back spread open abruptly, and it soared into the sky. It actually crashed headfirst into one of the whirlpools. After crashing into the whirlpool, it seemed to be swallowed just like that. Only the whirlpool continued to spin rapidly. The King Hun laughed wantonly, mocking its stupidity. Trash. Trash. As expected, even after obtaining power, you're still trash. You actually dared to crash into this king's. The whirlpool that it had crashed into suddenly stopped spinning. Then, under the Hun King's startled cry, it actually started spinning in the opposite direction. What? Not only did the whirlpool spin in the opposite direction, it even started to expand crazily. It seemed that there was something inside the whirlpool that was going to burst open. The King Hun even showed a trace of fear when the whirlpool started to expand. Bang! Finally, the whirlpool expanded to its limit and directly broke apart. At this moment, it was floating in the air, and its hands were grabbing onto a white horse's shadow. It actually directly bit onto the white horse's neck, biting and devouring the phantom of the white horse. Bit by bit, it was like a primitive man drinking raw meat. The scene was so bloody and violent. In just a moment, the phantom of the white horse was completely swallowed by it. At this moment, it opened its mouth, revealing a ferocious smile. Its pitch-black eyes turned and directly looked at another whirlpool. It flapped its wings and directly rushed into another whirlpool. No! 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 It wasn't until it crashed into the second whirlpool that the King Hun hurriedly screamed in horror. Unfortunately, it was too late. The whirlpool spun in the opposite direction again, expanded, and burst open. At this time, it directly pulled out a phantom of the white horse, grabbed it in its hand, and crazily bit and swallowed it. And this time, the phantom that was caught was a phoenix. Trash! I'm going to kill you! Seeing that more than half of the phoenix was swallowed in an instant, the King Hun screamed, and the remaining 8 whirlpools crazily shot out thunderbolts, converging into a huge thunderbolt net, directly covering the King Hun. Being disturbed by its meal, the King Hun suddenly became angry and opened its mouth to spit out a piece of the phoenix's phantom. Then, it stretched out its black arms, directly grabbed the thunderbolt net, and directly tore it apart. Then, with a roar, it crashed into the third whirlpool again. Don't come over! Don't come over! Ah! Right now, the Hun Emperor's voice was completely different from the majestic voice that shook the heavens and earth at the beginning. It was clearly much weaker. Even his confidence was no longer sufficient. His voice was trembling, and there was even a trace of fear in it. This time, what it caught was the phantom of the human warrior with the golden sword. It directly bit through the neck, and then swallowed it in big mouthfuls. The King Hun, who had successively killed 5 of the white horse's incarnations and the King Hun's original body, was directly beaten down by several levels. At this time, he was even weaker than the ultimate masters of the subworlds. He was unprecedentedly weak. He no longer went crazy because of anger, nor did he shout anything. The remaining whirlpools quickly converged and turned into a black light ball, shooting directly toward the exit of the Colosseum. Seeing that its food was about to escape, it screamed, and its body suddenly spun. As it spun, it set off a sharp tornado accompanied by blue-purple lightning. 9 Suns Thunderbolt Wild Dragon Drill. At this moment, the Yu Danqiang's voice sounded again. The moment he heard this voice, Taisetsu almost slid down from the big rock he was sitting on. With a strange expression, he muttered to himself, "Hey, hey, the style. Pay attention to the style." But he didn't care about the style. The sharp tornado accompanied by the lightning rushed directly toward the escaping black light ball, catching up and breaking it. Trash! Trash! I won't let you go. Ah! I'm the King Hun. La! The King Hun let out an extremely shrill scream, and at the same time, the huge destructive power directly destroyed more than half of the Colosseum's ice field. After a long time, when everything calmed down, Daz slowly flew toward the depths of the ice field with only rocks left. When he landed, he saw that it was sitting cross-legged on a gray-brown rock. It was biting and devouring the incarnation phantasm of King Hun. As for what the original face of this phantasm was, it couldn't be seen clearly at this moment. It didn't care about Taisetsu's arrival, and it ate the incarnation bit by bit. Finally, it stood up and jumped down from the rock. Its pitch-black eyes sized up Taisetsu in front of it. Taisetsu frowned and asked tentatively, "You Danqiang, Brother Chang?" It didn't move at all, and it just stared straight at him. Taisetsu pondered for a moment and then moved closer, but he felt more danger, so he secretly held the Jianlu sword's hilt and was always on guard. You should taste very good, I want to eat you, it said slowly. Finally, it opened its mouth and said. It was indeed Fish Egg Chong's voice, but it was clearly not Fish Egg Chong's tone. I'm not as easy to eat as the King Hun, Taisetsu stopped and said calmly. You're not Yu Danxiang. He's inside me, it said slowly. I was born because of his strong will, and I'm something he wants to be. So, although you smell very good, I won't eat you. Moreover, it's very difficult for me to eat you now. You're more powerful than the King Hun. Thank you very much. Taisetsu narrowed his eyes. However, you actually use things to describe yourself. So, what are you? Void Original Devil? Human? Or? It shook its head. I don't know either. I only know that I'm very powerful now, and I'll become even more powerful in the future. Other than you, there are many other delicious things here. If I eat them, I'll become even more powerful. Taisetsu frowned, thinking that this guy was talking about the other Void Original Devils in the arena, so he said calmly, That won't do. The Void Original Devils here are the materials I'm going to fight for, I won't just give it to you. It suddenly fell silent. After a moment of silence it nodded and said, All right, I'll give it to you, I'll look for food elsewhere. Taisetsu opened his mouth in shock. This guy was actually so easy to talk to? Although I won't eat you, it suddenly said. But I hope that you won't appear again. Otherwise, I'll still eat you. After saying that, it spread its black wings, flapped, and flew into the air. Seeing that it was about to leave, Taisetsu couldn't help but shout, Wait! Thank you! Its voice came. Also, I'm Wang Xiaohu. This is the name he wants. Wang Xiaohu. Taisetsu opened his mouth, watching it fly far away in a flash, and finally shook his head. Brother Chong, we'll meet again someday. An illusory figure was staggering within the Eternal Night Palace. He would occasionally turn his head to look behind him, and his face was filled with fear. This was the appearance of a handsome young man. Suddenly, the young man stopped in his tracks, and his face was filled with vigilance. But when the young man saw that the person standing in front of him was a charming man wearing a bright red robe, his vigilance relaxed a little, but he didn't relax too much. It's you, Lord Long Yang? Isn't this King Attila? The man in red. Long Yangjun walked over leisurely at this moment, his charming voice softening people's hearts. Probably ignoring his personality, he was really a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. This youth was Attila the Hun Emperor. More accurately speaking, this was the youth of his 10 incarnations, and was also the only incarnation that had survived this calamity. 9 of his 10 incarnations were gone, and even his main body had been torn apart. It was easy to imagine how desolate the Hun Emperor, who was once the pride of the heavens, was right now. Long Yangjun, don't block the way. I don't have time to deal with you. King Hun was no longer as reckless as before, but his tone was still tough. King Attila, you're really a heartless man, Long Yangjun said sadly. If I didn't save you just now, I'm afraid that you wouldn't even be able to keep this young man incarnation. What? King Hun couldn't help but be startled. Thinking back to the last moment, it seemed that there was a mysterious force that pulled him, and that was why the young man incarnation wasn't caught by that trash, that monster. Long Yangjun, why did you save me? The young man incarnation of the King Hun frowned at this moment. Long Yangjun covered his mouth and smiled, looking at the young man incarnation with a pair of peach blossoms. What a beautiful young man. What a cute child. The young man incarnation suddenly clamped his legs together, and his whole body shivered. He hurriedly said, Long Yangjun, thank you for saving me. I'll definitely repay this kindness tenfold in the future. King Attila, it's true that I like beauties, but… Long Yangjun narrowed his eyes. Once I think that this young man incarnation is a vulgar man like you, I can't help but want to vomit. Why would I want to have a long talk with you? It's good that it's not like this. The young man, incarnation, secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and then he frowned again. Then why did you save me? Of course it's because there are benefits to saving you. Long Yongjun chuckled. King Attila, since you're safe now, I'll take this benefit. The young man, incarnation, frowned, and with a thought, he already knew what the benefit Long Yongjun was talking about was. He sighed in his heart. It seemed that he had to give up some benefits, so he reluctantly took out a throne emblem and threw it out. Here you go. I know why you saved me. You saved me, and I'll write it off. Long Yongjun stretched out his hand and took the throne emblem into his hand. He chuckled. In that case, I'll kindly accept it. King Attila, you're really unique. I'm a little reluctant to do it. Long Yongjun, you? The king of Hun acutely sensed the murderous intent in Long Yongjun's words, and his expression changed slightly. I've already given you the benefits, Long Yongjun, don't push your luck. After all, I was asked to do it. Long Yongjun smiled, and the sword hanging at his waist was already out of its sheath. I'm sorry, King Attila. Unsheathing, sheathing. He didn't even move a step, and a small sword mark appeared on the neck of the young man, incarnation, in front of him, and then the head rolled down. It's a pity that you have such a pretty face. Long Yongjun took out a handkerchief to cover his hand and picked up the young man's head. Then, he knocked on the forehead of the young man with his finger, and the head actually shattered. In the end, all that was left was a grayish ball of light. Lord Long Yang chuckled, pinched his fingers together, and drew a line in the air. Immediately, a human-sized crack appeared beside him. It was a passage leading to a certain subworld. Musashi said that you'll never be able to rise again. Long Yongjun said softly, King Attila, since we're acquaintances, I'll send you to a good family. You have to be strong. He threw the ball of light into the passage, and then he disappeared from the corridor of the Eternal Night Palace. A certain subworld. Doomsday civilization, survivor base, hospital, delivery room. A man anxiously paced back and forth outside the delivery room. Finally, the doctor came out. Congratulations, General, it's a daughter. What? The man was furious when he heard that. During the examination, it was clearly said that it was a boy. General? The man snorted coldly. Raise her first. The commander of the Eastern base likes young girls. We can exchange for more food. Here, there's no extra food to raise trash. Understood. The doctor hurriedly nodded, but in his heart, he could only sigh for the little life that was just born. What a pitiful little fellow. She was just born into this world, and her fate was already decided. At least, change her name, General. The doctor sighed. After all, you're her father. Let's call her Attila. After that, the general left. Chapter 1488. After it left the Colosseum, it went straight to the Eternal Night Palace. It followed the path and soon came to the stone house outside the square. Yu Danxiang and Wang Xiaohu silently walked into the stone house and sat down alone. After an unknown amount of time, it slowly raised its head and looked at the door of the stone house. It saw a figure leaning against the door beam at an unknown time. There were 2 katanas, one long and one short, on his waist, and a wine cup in his hand. He looked frivolous. Master Musashi. Master Musashi looked at it directly, but didn't say anything. After a while, Master Musashi suddenly said, Should I call you Yu Danxiang or Wang Xiaohu? It frowned, but still didn't say anything. Master Wu Chang shook his head and said, In any case, I am the current guardian of the Eternal Night Palace. Whatever happens inside, I more or less know. And you can just treat it as the middle-aged uncle's voyeuristic desire causing mischief? It finally couldn't help but say after a long silence, Wang Xiaohu. Master Musashi nodded. After a while, he suddenly said, I can only see what happened inside the Eternal Night Palace. He doesn't blame you. Wang Xiaohu replied expressionlessly. Musashi shook his head and said, "But I didn't think that in that situation. I mean, there will be a change like yours. Now I can't say whether it is your own good fortune or Yu Danxiang's own chance." "I am not him." Wang Xiaohu also shook his head. Master Musashi said, "It doesn't matter if you are or not. I was going to give this to him, but now it's the same to give it to you." He directly threw some content carved on the stone slab to Wang Xiaohu. "I saw you beat up King of Hun. You still don't know how to use your strength. This is the training method on the stone slab. It can help you a little. It's not something exquisite. It's just some skills I figured out when I was bored. Looking at you, you are probably not a mage." Wang Xiaohu looked at the lifelike figure carved on the stone slab. It suddenly stretched out its claw-like fingers and touched the engravings on the stone slab. After a while, it nodded and said, "Thank you. What are you going to do next?" Master Musashi asked again. It thought for a while and said, "Look for food here. Eat more like King of Hun. This way I can become stronger." Master Musashi waved his hand and said, "King of Hun is not an invincible expert. His power was obtained through trickery. He has never seriously polished it. At best, he is like a child who suddenly got a divine weapon. Of course, there are more or less members like King of Hun in the Transcendence organization. After all, there are many subworlds. There will still be people who are lucky enough to obtain power. But I advise you not to think that you can eat other people just because you can eat King of Hun." It seemed to be seriously thinking about this question, and soon had an answer. "Then I will go to other places and eat more food. After I become stronger, I will come back here." Master Wu Chang chuckled rather helplessly and bitterly. "You're single amongst hundreds of original void demons, and you have the true soul of a fishball strong human. I don't know what your situation is either. Half original demon? Mutant? In fact, I can't tell your future now. But if you can become stronger, it won't be bad." It asked curiously, "Aren't you afraid that I will come back and eat you after I become stronger?" Musashi smiled and said, "If I am afraid, I will kill you right now. Or do you think that you can be tough in front of me after defeating King of Hun?" "Okay, I will leave here first." It nodded. It didn't seem to be angry at Musashi's words. It was calm, as cold as a stone. "Go to the depths of the crevice," Master Musashi said. It frowned in confusion. At this time, Master Wu Chang slowly said, "Although I don't know what you are, I have seen something similar. That thing is called Void Azura. It also has a human-like posture and even has its own thoughts. Maybe you can find the answer to your essence from the Void Azura." It tilted its head and thought, then asked directly, "How do I get there?" Musashi said, "Sit on your Yu Danxiang's mount. Void original demons know how to go to the depths of the crevice. Of course, how to make it take you there depends on your own ability." "Okay." Wang Xiaohu nodded. "Is there anything else?" Master Musashi waved his hand disinterestedly. "No, you can get lost." It still didn't get angry, and walked right past Musashi, out of the stone hut. It then opened its mouth and spat out a palm-sized bone flute from its body, and blew it. This was the tool that Yu Danxiang used to summon that void original demon in the form of a flying ant. In a short while, the void original demon that had a grudge against Yu Danxiang for killing his wife had already arrived. It only lingered in the square, not daring to come close. It spread its wings and rode on the back of the flying ant. The flying ant original devil seemed to have sensed a trace of an enemy's aura, but became rather puzzled. The flying ant original devil even felt an inexplicable pressure from its body. It didn't dare to resist, and allowed Wang Xiaohu to ride on its back just like that. Wang Xiaohu reached out to touch the antennae on the flying ant's head, and said in a low voice, "Go to the depths of the crevice, or I'll eat you." Hearing Wang Xiaohu's words, Master Musashi couldn't help but open his mouth, but when he saw that the void original demon seemed to understand, and was about to spread its wings and fly high, He swallowed the words back into his stomach. Master Musashi. Wang Xiaohu looked down with an indifferent expression and said slowly, "When I come back next time, I'll eat you, the first one I'll eat. Then I'll have to go back and sharpen these two almost rusty knives." Master Musashi shrugged carelessly. Wang Xiaohu looked deeply at Musashi, and then forcefully grabbed the Void Original Demon's antennae. The Void Original Demon cried out in pain, and then directly flew out of the square of the Eternal Night Palace, towards the depths of the crevice. When it was completely out of sight, Master Musashi raised his wine cup and took a sip, and then walked into the stone hut alone to take a nap. I heard that the Void Original Demons have a hole in their hearts. They need to fill this hole, but there are no souls in the crevice that can fill this hole, so the Void Original Demons will never stop, and will always be looking for food. I'm the first, this stupid disciple. Master Musashi's eyelids slowly closed. It's suddenly quiet. Whether it was the King of Hun who was finally defeated by Long Yangjun in a subworld, or what happened in the Eternal Night Palace's Colosseum, it didn't seem to affect the daily lives of the Transcendents in Paradise Lost. Many Transcendents were even enthusiastically discussing the battle for the throne emblem that had just ended. What they cared more about was the ability of the newcomer, Erex, and the possibility of snatching the throne emblem from this newcomer. But their discussion didn't last long, and a piece of shocking news came from Paradise Lost. Long Yangjun had already collected 8 throne emblems, and directly bypassed several senior members who had been stuck at the 7th emblem, and immediately initiated the battle for the throne. And Long Yangjun's opponent in the battle for the throne was the one who led the army to attack heaven not long ago, and then returned in defeat. Lionheart. The battle for the throne required at least 3 thrones to be present as witnesses. Currently, only the Fushi throne and the Begatisha throne, who was busy training 2 students, needed 1 more. Therefore, the battle for the throne would begin immediately after the 3rd throne returned. Musashi, go drink. I want to comprehend the essence of drunken sword. I don't have time, Scram. What a fickle lover. In order to avoid Long Yangjun's entanglement before the battle, Master Musashi directly walked into the Colosseum, saying that he was going to clean up the place. But when Master Musashi walked into the Colosseum, he was instantly dumbfounded. The Colosseum, which had been compressed by the subspace, was incomparably huge, and should have been filled with original void demons. But when Master Musashi arrived, there were only a few original void demons left in the Colosseum. He really killed them all? Master Musashi, whose mouth was wide open, blinked his eyes. But where did they go? This person was naturally Taisetsu. As for Taisetsu's people? Taisetsu had already quietly left the Eternal Night Palace. At the entrance of the crack, he was bored waiting for Miss Maid to open the passage so that she could send him back. There's no concept of time here. Do I have to wait for a long time? Taisetsu squatted on the ground, thought for a while, then took out the dictionary that Miss Maid had given him from his Qiankuan bag. The thick dictionary of the history of the Roman Empire began to read to kill time. The crack in the dimension seemed to be much quieter than any other place. The modern world on a certain coastline in Britain. A manor. Miss Maid brought Adam to the new world to deal with the matter of the new server for the Master God project. Taisetsu was also sent to the crack to collect materials. Boss Luo, who had suddenly become all alone, could only go to school by himself. This made Luochio involuntarily recall the days before he met Yi. He was in the mood, so he took the town's bus, planning to take the original route to see the surrounding scenery. Good morning, Teacher Poulin. It's you? On the bus, Boss Lu and Teacher Poulin unexpectedly bumped into each other. There weren't many people on the bus, so naturally, the seats were quite empty. Luochio directly sat down beside Teacher Poulin and asked casually, Teacher Poulin, do you usually take this bus to school? Teacher Poulin shook his head and said, I usually walk. It's just that I went for a run in the morning and ran a little too far and forgot the time, so I had to take the bus back." Although that was the case, Teacher Poulin didn't look like he had just finished his morning run. Instead, there was a bag beside him that was stained with some soil and dew, proving that he was indeed outside the suburbs. The bus slowly drove along a cliff on the coast into the town. When it passed by a large bay, the entire bus couldn't help but tilt a little. Boss Luo suddenly said, "It seems that only this road leads to the town." "There's indeed only one road here." Teacher Poulin smiled and said, "There's another road on the other side, but it'll be easier than this one." As he said this, Teacher Poulin looked out the window at the yellow lady with the yellow teeth who unceasingly flitted past. He said softly, "This road is indeed a bit more difficult to walk on, especially when it rains. It's very easy for accidents to happen." "Indeed." Luochio nodded. "For example, like a car accident. If there's a whole family in the bus, it'll be a very unfortunate thing." Teacher Poulin suddenly looked at Luochio's side face and said indifferently, "You seem to have another meaning." Boss Luo looked back at him and shook his head. "Nothing. I just feel sorry for this misfortune from a person's point of view." "Purely from a person's point of view? You speak as if you're not a person." Teacher Poulin carefully read these words in his heart, but he didn't express the thoughts in his heart. He had a rather deep impression of this new student from the academy, but he vaguely felt that the other party's origins weren't simple. In fact, it was reasonable to think about it. Although this school was very famous, it was located in a remote rural area. If there wasn't another purpose, very few people would choose to study here. Moreover, it was a relatively unpopular theology course. Was it to better inherit the business or something like that? Teacher Poulin couldn't help but think of what Luochio had said before. He was still very curious. What kind of business required theology knowledge? It couldn't be an exorcist family, right? Teacher Poulin had seen exorcists before, and naturally, he had also encountered so-called exorcist families. In his life of more than 30 years, he, who had possessed supernatural powers since he was young, had always crisscrossed between the territories of ordinary people and abnormal people. "Speaking of which, have you heard of Van Helsing?" Teacher Poulin asked suddenly. Luochio looked at Teacher Poulin curiously, as if he didn't understand the topic at this time. "Van Helsing?" Teacher Poulin smiled slightly and said, "Legend has it that Van Helsing was a very famous monster hunter. He was active in the mid-19th century and hunted many monsters that were harmful to humans." Luochio asked rather interestedly, "Does Teacher Poulin think that monsters and monster hunters really exist in this world?" Teacher Poulin chuckled. "Just think of it as me simply wanting to relieve some of the silence at this time. Aren't you interested in the topic of gods and monsters, new student at the School of Divinity?" Boss Luo thought for a while and finally said, "I should be interested." "Should be?" Teacher Poulin was startled. "That's an interesting answer, student." Boss Luo said, "After all, it's still very difficult for ordinary people to encounter such things as monsters." "That's not necessarily true," Teacher Poulin said noncommittally. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not. At this time, he kept looking out of the window behind Luochio, facing the sea. Boss Luo looked back and saw that the coastline suddenly darkened. Dark clouds covered the coastline as if it was going to rain. At the same time, there seemed to be a faint singing sound on the road around the mountain. Chapter 1489. It was a cheerful song, as if a girl was singing for her lover from afar. It was poetic, picturesque, and dreamy. Just as the town bus drove past the winding mountain road, along the coastline, and bypassed the beach at the lowest point of the road. In fact, the sky was dark, and the distant sea level was covered with a layer of shadow. A storm was coming. It was supposed to be depressing weather, but on the few people on the bus, a mysterious smile appeared on almost everyone's face. As if they saw something. It was an urgent and blurred look. At this moment, the driver suddenly braked and rushed out of the door, over the guardrail of the road, and rushed to the beach ahead. He was not the first one, the second one, the third one. The passengers on the bus rushed out one after another, regardless of gender or age. They rushed out of the bus, over the guardrail, and rushed to the beach like love. This was Boss Luo's first impression. He quietly watched these passengers' actions and did not stop them. He was not alone. At least at this moment, Ms. Poulin was still with him. Although this sudden abnormal situation was likely to be caused by Ms. Poulin, probably so. He looked back at Ms. Poulin and thought for a while. I take back what I said just now. Even if it's an ordinary person, as long as he or she has the intention, it's easy to encounter strange things. Ms. Poulin couldn't help but smile. Student, do you mean I'm the one with the intention? Boss Luo said ambiguously. If it's Ms. Poulin, the result will be much better. If I'm the one with the intention, because of my words, it's not necessarily a good thing. For example, last time in South America, an unconscious thought finally led to a mess. Boss Luo couldn't find a way to control the ability to interfere with or even rationalize something. It was just like how you couldn't control those sudden thoughts to not appear. This sentence seems to have another meaning? Ms. Poulin couldn't help but be curious. Nothing. Boss Luo smiled slightly. I just suddenly thought of something. It seems that something is coming out. With that said, Luocio looked at the seaside again. Most of the passengers had walked to the sea. At this time, 3 black figures could be seen flying over from the distant sea. In the blink of an eye, the black figures floated to the surface of the water. They were actually 3 beautiful women with long brown hair, grayish-green eyes, and fair skin. Their naked bodies above the seawater were barely visible because of their reddish-brown hair mixed with the seawater. The 3 women opened their small mouths slightly, and the seductive and beautiful singing voice came from their mouths. The driver, who was the first to run to the beach, had already stepped into the sea and walked towards one of the naked beauties. The resistance of the sea didn't stop his passion at this moment. Soon, he was hugging one of the beauties. This was probably the composition that the photographer was looking for. If one ignored the beauty's current actions, this naked beauty's seductive lips suddenly split open at this moment. The teeth inside were like saws, sharp and dense, frightening. At this moment, she bit the driver's neck. Strangely, the driver's eyes seemed to be blurred at this moment, as if he couldn't feel the pain at all. But in an instant, the other 2 beauties also hugged the other passengers, revealing their terrifying teeth. In the car. Acroids. Teacher Pu Lin's voice was heard. He had already left his seat. He placed his hands on a seat in the row near the seaside and bent down to look ahead through the window. He slowly said, "This is also the so-called siren." Siren? Luocio blinked. When he was in Kelowna, he had met a lot of big and small monsters, but he didn't know much about them in human outside of Kelowna. He had only seen creatures like vampires and golden dragons a few days ago when he entered the inhuman domain. He remembered that Miss Maid once mentioned the siren. Last year, when he went to the seaside fishing village with Ren Xiling and Lizzie for a holiday, they occasionally talked about it. According to Miss Maid, the siren was almost extinct, and some of them were hidden near the Barents Sea. But it was not far from the sea on the British side. They are a few little guys who fled here. Teacher Pu Lin nodded and said, their parents were killed by a few monster hunters some time ago. They also escaped from that disaster. After that, they fled all the way to this vicinity. Don't worry, they won't really eat people. They'll only suck a little of their blood and let them go. Their saliva contains special ingredients that can make people anesthetized. As for their singing, it has a hypnotic effect. After these passengers wake up, they will forget what happened. Luocio looked at Mr. Poulin and found that he was carefully observing the scene in front of him. He had said so much, so obviously, he knew these young sirens long ago. Why did he still observe them so carefully? It seems that Mr. Poulin's morning exercise includes supervising these young sirens. Luocchio thought for a while and understood something. Mr. Poulin looked quite helpless. I'm really doing exercise, and I do have something to do in the suburbs. As for meeting them, I can only say that it's just a coincidence. In fact, they come ashore almost once a week. If you want to see them next time, you can come at the same time. Why do you need to supervise them? Boss Luo asked curiously. Mr. Poulin said indifferently, every life has its natural process of birth and death, just like the withering of trees and the drying of the sea. This is the law of nature. Don't you think it's disrespectful to life if this process is distorted because of human actions? Boss Luo nodded. That's right, these passengers seem to have a long life and can do a lot of things. So, Mr. Poulin is equivalent to the manager of raw rice. Teacher Poulin seemed to be somewhat unaccustomed to the word manager. He slightly furrowed his brows and even revealed a trace of bewilderment in his eyes. He shook his head and said, I just don't want to hurt these passengers because of them, but I also don't want to see them get hurt. If their foraging really isn't a big hindrance to the passengers and doesn't affect anything, don't you think this is the best situation? Of course, since we want to guarantee this situation, we need to have a judge at all times. What if the judge is absent once, and then an accident happens this time? Boss Luo suddenly asked. Teacher Poulin glanced at Luocchio and said with a wry smile, This is really a sharp and mean question. It's like asking me whether I can help the weak all the time after helping them occasionally. If I can't do it, I wouldn't have done it in the first place, right? Boss Luo smiled casually. He was the type who was used to asking questions but rarely gave opinions. He always thought that his opinions could only represent himself. As for others, this was the beauty of the biological diversity of human beings. Teacher Poulin shook his head and gave his own answer. If an accident really happened because of my departure, then it can only mean that the fate of both sides has come to an end. Since this relationship has come to an end, then what else do I have to blame myself for? What a beautiful explanation! Boss Luo nodded, and continued to observe the movements of the three young sirens. Just as Teacher Poulin had said, they quickly let go of their respective first prey, and then looked for the second one. Every prey had only sucked a bit of fresh blood. From a physiological point of view, this indeed wouldn't affect one's health. Donating blood was actually helpful in the reconstruction of the human body's blood. Soon, the young sirens seemed to have eaten their fill. They let go of the passengers and then walked toward the bus. They did not seem to dare to walk to the shore. They only dared to look at the bus from afar. Then, they slowly retreated, probably afraid of something. Until they finally disappeared into the sea, the dark sky seemed to be clearer. Because there was no driver, he and Teacher Poulin could only sit quietly in the car at this time, waiting for the driver and passengers who had fainted by the seaside to wake up. In fact, this should be the case, but Teacher Poulin got out of the car at this time. She moved the driver and passengers back one by one and placed them in their original positions. They seem to be afraid of you, Teacher Poulin. Boss Luo, who didn't help at all, said while keeping an appearance of looking on with folded arms. Mr. Poulin did not turn his head and said casually, Isn't it because I am the one who supervised them? Boss Luo just smiled and then returned to his position. Soon after, the unconscious driver and passengers gradually woke up, but they completely forgot what had happened. Their clothes were wet and the bus suddenly stopped on the road, but they did not lose their belongings, which was very puzzling. However, when they looked at the time, it was obvious that a lot of time had passed. The anxious passengers could only urge the driver to continue. Rumble. The town's bus continued to move forward according to the original route. At this time, Boss Luo suddenly turned his head to look at Teacher Poulin and said, I heard that the siren is the maid of Persephone, the queen of hell. But because she failed to fulfill her duty of protecting Persephone, the queen of hell, she was punished to become a monster and guide the souls to the underworld. Mr. Poulin shrugged and then praised. You don't know much about mythology, but the answers after class won't add any points. As the rumors say, it's really hard to get credits for your class. Boss Luo smiled. On the way, they did not talk about the siren. Boss Luo did not ask Mr. Poulin more, and Mr. Poulin did not ask about the origin of this new student. There were no cars on the road near the beach for a while, but a small black shadow suddenly jumped out from the grass by the roadside. It was a black cat. The black cat easily jumped over the guardrail of the road, and then walked into the beach area. It walked along the coastline, and because of its lightness, it did not leave any footprints on the sand that had become fine and firm due to the seawater. Not long after, the black cat came to a group of reef. It jumped skillfully among the grotesquely shaped reefs and finally stopped at someone's feet. It was a man. His back was facing the black cat, and he was looking at the narrow sea in front of him through the gap between the reef. Soon, the black cat that was not satisfied with just rubbing under his feet suddenly jumped in front of him. He reached out and hugged the black cat into his arms. The black cat was trembling in the man's arms, as if it was afraid of something. Did you meet the person that you are afraid of again? The man lowered his head and stroked the black cat's back silently. After a long time, the black cat completely calmed down. Its body did not tremble anymore, and then it jumped down from the man's arms. After a few jumps, the black cat disappeared among the reef. The man sighed softly, reached into his arms and took out something, less than the size of a palm. It was a red and blue button, a remote control. Could it be, this time it will be, the man whispered something, and his fingers rubbed back and forth on the red and blue buttons. Maybe he wanted to press it, or maybe he did not want to press it, or maybe he did not dare to press it, and did not know which one to press in the end. This is not what I want anymore, he finally sighed, put the red and blue button remote control into his arms, and finally left the group of reef. In the distant time and space, the mansion of the underworld, in the palace of the king of hell. When Joe woke up from his deep sleep, he found himself on a big soft bed, but the surroundings were not bright, whether it was the walls, the floor, or even the big bed. The furniture in the room was not gray but black, and even the sky outside the window was very dark. There was no light, but even if it was dark, he could still see everything clearly. It seemed that someone had dimmed the color here. But Joe felt a trace of coldness. Where was this place? How did he come to this place? He only remembered that he seemed to be taken to the seaside by the big sister, and then, what happened after that, he could not remember clearly. Big sister? Big sister? Big sister, are you there? Where is this place? The young Joe climbed down from the bed. Big sister, is this your room? Big sister? He kept on yelling. At this moment, the door of the room creaked open. Then, a beautiful woman in maid attire slowly pushed a dining cart in. Joe couldn't help but widen his eyes in surprise. This woman was obviously not the big sister he knew, but he was not sure because the big sister he knew liked to change into various appearances to tease him. Big sister? Joe asked tentatively. Big sister? The maid looked at Joe with confusion and thought for a while. You seem to have mistaken me for someone else, but I'm sorry we didn't know each other before. My name is G.C., the maid of Nether Queen, and now, I'm responsible for taking care of you, young master. Joe blinked his eyes. What was young master? I'm Joe? Chapter 1490. Within the enormous palace, Persephone, the underworld queen, who was wearing a long black dress, stood in front of a mirror and looked at her own makeup. Not far away, the master of the underworld was holding a dark red wine cup and looking at the sky. Hades suddenly said, "The winter in the underworld is ending." Hearing this, the underworld queen turned around and looked at Hades gently. She said indifferently, "There should be 4 seasons in a year." Hades just smiled casually. He was still looking outside the palace. The mountains, the greenish-black, lifeless mountains, and the purgatory land that flowed with sulfur and magma. As the underworld king, who was in charge of the underworld, he couldn't even tell if this scenery was ugly or beautiful. At first, he felt that it was barren and not beautiful. The scenery on Mount Olympus was very beautiful. You shouldn't have adopted a human child who accidentally wandered into this place as your adopted son. The underworld queen suddenly said, "Humans can't adapt to the environment of the underworld. You just want a toy to relieve your boredom. Hades, you shouldn't do this for a toy. The creatures of the underworld can't accept a human as their young master." Hades turned around with a smile. "Persephone, you may want to see this child. He's so lovable. His fair skin is just like yours, and his eyes are just like yours. This will stop me from missing you while you're away. Furthermore, he's completely able to adapt to the environment of the underworld. He's no ordinary human." The underworld queen frowned slightly at the underworld king's words of love. "You mean, this child is not human? He is the descendant of a human and a god, like a demigod like Hercules?" The underworld king said indifferently, "My underworld queen, please don't mention me in my territory. It will remind me of your father." The underworld queen looked at the underworld king silently. Then, she turned around and didn't say anything. She was the queen of the underworld. She couldn't even use her magic in the underworld. She needed to return to the ground. She was the goddess of fertility on the ground. Hades was truly fond of this magical boy. He had even sent the underworld empress' own maid to him. But this didn't seem to matter much. Winter was about to end. She was about to leave this underground abyss and return to the surface. Perhaps when the next winter comes and she returns to the underworld again, the child would already be gone. After all, the master of the underworld is so capricious. Who knows what the future holds? "Big sister, why did you call me young master?" After all, Joe was only a 5-year-old child. His mind didn't allow him to think too much. Only this kind of sudden situation could make him think. Besides, this big sister was really beautiful as that bad big sister. Was she really not the bad big sister who had transformed into her? Where did the bad big sister go? The maid in front of him, the woman who called herself GC, said expressionlessly, "You are now the adopted son of the master of underworld. Naturally, you are the young master of this underworld creature. From today onwards, your status will be noble. At least, that's how it looks right now." Joe blinked and lowered his head. "Big sister, I want to go home. I have been out for a long time. If I don't go back, my father and grandmother will be worried about me." The maid GC said indifferently, "This is your home, young master. Your current identity is the underworld's young master, and your only father is the underworld king. You will be like this from now on. At least, that's how it looks right now." "I don't want to," Joe shouted loudly. At this moment, he experienced the fighting strength of a naughty child. He directly rolled on the ground, crying and shouting. That's right, he was like those naughty children that relatives brought over when they called their relatives over. The kind that wanted to be beaten to death. However, it was clear that the maid who was sent here was not a gentle and rational person. Facing Joe's tantrum, the maid, Jess, directly grabbed Joe's calf, lifted him upside down, and walked towards the balcony. "Young master, please stop your tantrum. The palace should be kept quiet. You probably don't like the heat of the lava below." A wave of hot air mixed with the pungent smell of sulfur rose from below. Joe looked at the orange-red river below in horror. He even saw the bubbles that were constantly popping and bursting on the surface of the orange-red river. As expected, he quickly stopped crying. This big sister, who was worse than a bad big sister, reminded Joe of the auntie at his home. That auntie was really fierce when she beat people up. This evil big sister. "Very good. Have you quieted down, young master?" The maid GC nodded at this moment, but she still had the same look of disdain as before. "Please forgive my rudeness, but the underworld king ordered me to take care of your daily life and teach you the rules of underworld. I don't. Joe suddenly shuddered. But when he looked at the maid GC's eyes, he couldn't say the word, I don't want. He was terrified. At this moment, a hearty laughter sounded. Joe looked up and saw a figure bathed in golden light, appearing above the balcony of the palace. The maid GC frowned at this moment and quickly put down the new young master of Underworld. She said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Greetings, Messenger Hermes. The figure in front of her walked out of the golden light. It was a handsome blond young man wearing a pair of winged shoes and holding a snake-coiled staff. He said casually, It's time. I'm here to welcome the goddess of fertility back to the ground. 3 more days, Messenger Hermes. The maid GC was still neither servile nor overbearing. The young man, Hermes said indifferently, Father God said that this year's winter will end early. Spring should come early because the ground is too cold. Many innocent people have frozen to death in the cold winter. Because of this, the Queen of Heaven often laments and cries. You know, GC, Father God loves the Queen of Heaven so deeply, just like how the underworld king cherishes Persephone. Father God and the Queen of Heaven really love each other like that. It would be strange. The maid GC nodded silently. Okay, Messenger Hermes, I will convey your purpose, but you have to meet the Underworld King in person. Of course. Hermes smiled slightly. How can I not like to see Uncle Hades? But before that, can you tell me what's going on with this human child? Why is there a living creature in the underworld? This doesn't seem to be in accordance with the rules, does it? She probably knew that Hermes would ask about this sooner or later, so when she was asked, there was no panic on her face. Messenger Hermes, this is the will of the Lord of the Underworld. If you want to know, perhaps you should wait until you see him and ask him in person. Hermes shrugged with an indifferent attitude. He then looked around and suddenly asked, By the way, where's Minta? Why don't I see her? The maid, GC, glanced at Hermes indifferently, then pointed at a wasteland outside the palace walls. But in this underworld where all living things had died out, it seemed that only this wasteland had strangely grown a patch of emerald green. Hermes then noticed the existence of the green and looked at it curiously. This looks like mint grass? Minta has died. The maid GC said faintly, This is the mint grass that grew from her ashes. How did she die? Hermes couldn't help but frown. The maid GC didn't speak at this time. Instead, she turned around and then slowly knelt down. Seeing this, Hermes turned his gaze and then directly flew into the room. He stood quietly, bowed his head, and said respectfully, Greetings, Pluto. Joe had been listening to the evil elder sister and the big brother who could fly talking, but he didn't dare to speak. At this time, when he saw their actions, he quickly looked over and was shocked. He saw a tall figure standing in the room without him knowing. He even saw the other party's eyes and couldn't help but shiver. His body seemed to be frozen, and his mind was blank. He couldn't say anything. Hermes. The arrival of the Netherworld King caused a slight change in the atmosphere of the room. I already know why you're here. However, winter on Earth will not stay here in advance. Go back and tell your father that the Netherworld mansion is very spacious. You don't have to worry about the space here. Come back in 3 days. Hermes raised his head and said, Pluto, going and coming back is too time-consuming. Since it's only 3 days, let me stay in the mansion of the dead and wait. As you wish. Pluto said indifferently and then waved his hand. GC, prepare a place for Hermes to rest. After that, the maid GC led the emissary from Mount Olympus out of the room. When they left, Hermes couldn't help but look back at the only child in the room, Joe. He secretly winked at Joe, as if he was giving some kind of hint. His fingers secretly pointed outside the palace. It seemed to be the place outside the palace where the green was. Soon, only Pluto and Joe were left in the room. Raise your head and tell me your name, the tall figure suddenly said. Joe subconsciously trembled and raised his head. At this time, his voice also trembled as he said his name, Joe. My name is Joe. Pluto nodded and then said indifferently, From today onwards, you have to forget your previous name. You will be my son, your name will be… Poulin. Joe subconsciously nodded. He even seemed to have forgotten how to say no. He didn't dare to go against the will of the other party. These few days, GC will be in charge of taking care of and teaching you. Pluto continued, 3 days later, I will come back this year. I hope that by that time, you have already adapted to this place, my child. Joe could only subconsciously nod. Hades then turned around and left. His body turned into a black fog and gradually disappeared. At this time, Joe sat down on the ground. He resisted the urge to cry. He hugged his knees and sobbed. I want to go home. Big sister, where are you? But this time, the bad big sister didn't suddenly appear and tease him. The winter in the mansion of the dead was very cold. In fact, the mansion of the dead seemed to only have winter, right? Outside the window of the palace, a figure slowly walked over and walked to the only green place full of mint grass. He stood there and looked at the huge palace in front of him. He subconsciously frowned. This was Old Ha, who came to the mansion of the dead with Nero because of the remote control. He called himself a Hades. Father. He called softly toward the huge palace behind the tall wall and clenched his fists. The remote control with red and blue buttons was placed on the table just like that. Nero's gaze would glance at the remote control from time to time, but she didn't do anything. She just kept moving her lips quickly to serve the shop owner in front of her. She told him some things about her boss. The shop owner listened carefully, and his expression didn't change. It seemed that no matter what the future looked like, it couldn't move him. As for Eleanor, who was the maid at that time, she would occasionally frown. Obviously, this should be normal. After all, she was listening to a black soul who was the next shop owner's subordinate, telling what happened to the next shop owner. Moreover, according to Nero's words, the next shop owner was a man who was so bad that words couldn't describe him. How could such a man replace the current shop owner and become the next shop owner? My boss's 12th wife's name is Susie Juan. Nero rolled her eyes, speaking of which, this Susie Juan is very powerful. She is the last princess of the Xianyuan royal family in Kelowna. Not only is she powerful, but she is also super rich. She likes to play a little toy called the Heiress Ball of Delights with my boss. Have you seen the Heiress Ball of Delights? Let me tell you, this Heiress Ball of Delights is actually ridiculous. Finally, Eleanor, the maid at that time, seemed to have reached the limit of her patience. At this moment, she frowned and looked at Nero sternly, saying in a deep voice, Nonsense. How dare you tease the shop owner like this? Nero stuck out her tongue at this time, then looked at the shop owner with a pitiful look. But what I said is true. If you don't believe it, you can go to the future and see if it's true. You can do it, right? After all, you are the shop owner. You! Eleanor's pupils contracted slightly, and the sternness in her eyes deepened. At this moment, Nero directly lowered her neck and shrank back. This former maid was much easier to get along with than the maid in her house. At the very least, she could show her emotions occasionally. Then I won't say that Eleanor will become my boss's 13th concubine. At this moment, Nero had a limited smile and said with a smile, Former shop owner, I'm afraid that your maid will beat me to death. If it was in the past, I would also want to beat you to death. Finally, the shop owner at that time said indifferently. This was the first sentence he said after listening to the stories of the next shop owner and his wives. Chapter 1491. If it was in the past, I would have beaten you to death too. Such words of warning, in the end, it still made Nero reveal a subtle expression of strategic retreat. This was because she could not figure out the temperament of the former shop owner, whether she had the same temperament as her boss Luo. Thus, Nero obediently raised her hands and made a gesture of surrender. She looked at Eleanor, who would have already beaten her up if not for the fact that she had to abide by her duties. All right, I admit that I'm talking nonsense. My boss doesn't have 13 concubines. He only has 7 concubines at most. Currently, well, I mean in the future, he's planning on how to get Miss Eleanor. Master, Eleanor requests to purchase a chance to privately judge the unknown onyx soul before her. The servant girl calmed down abruptly, but under her calm expression, she spoke with a turbulent undercurrent. What was a shop? A shop was a shop where one could buy anything. Furthermore, the customers of the shop were never just customers outside the shop, they were also customers of the shop. A private judge? Nero could not help but open her mouth. To be able to make revenge sound so good, it was indeed the servant girl's style. She looked at Eleanor in surprise, secretly guessing what kind of unspeakable relationship this servant girl had with the future servant girl. In some ways, Nero even felt that her servant girl's temperament was similar to Eleanor's. The servant girl, the next servant girl. Could it be some kind of inheritance? Nero, who was letting her imagination run wild, did not seem to care whether the former shop owner would agree to Eleanor's request. She had her own thoughts about the situation she was currently in. Nero did not believe in the nonsense of not fighting one's own family. The Michael Club she grew up in was a place filled with all kinds of competition. Now that the former shop owner knew that the shop would change hands in the future, how could he not have any thoughts? The position of the shop owner was like the position of an omniscient and omnipotent god in the truest sense. While Nero's imagination was running wild and she even began to formulate a battle of time and space, the servant girl beside her was obviously waiting for the shop owner's reply. She believed that her master would give her a satisfactory answer. I won't turn away any customer who wants to trade with the shop, Eleanor. The shop owner at that time slowly said, but in terms of the most basic etiquette, she belongs to the next black soul. In theory, the next employee and I belong to the same shop system. In terms of etiquette, without the consent of the next employee, I don't recommend making decisions on the next employee. Of course, this is only my personal opinion, Eleanor. You can still insist on your choice. Like I said, I will not refuse any customer who trades with my shop. Hearing this, Eleanor fell into deep thought. On the other hand, Nero was standing on a stool, sharpening his knife. He was obviously very interested in going all out. After all, her life lantern was in the Ark of the Covenant. Even if it was only the future Ark of the Covenant, Boss Luo should still have a way to revive her, right? Dying in the past and resurrecting in the Ark of the Covenant in the right time and space was the simplest and most violent way Nero could think of to escape. Well, it was probably a method that only someone with her unique brain would think of. Eleanor understands. The servant girl at that time sighed softly. When she looked at Nero again, her gaze had become indifferent, as if she was looking at a piece of sand by the roadside. Nero blinked and said cheekily, "An employee who listens to the boss has no soul. He won't get a promotion or a raise." Eleanor naturally ignored her. The shop owner at that time said, "Don't provoke Eleanor with your words. If you want to go back to the future, I will send you back. So, you don't have to rush to return by resurrecting from the Ark of the Covenant. Since the next employee sent you here, he naturally has his reasons. You can stay for a while longer." Nero opened her mouth like a deflated balloon and sat down. The most difficult opponent was this kind of person, who could see through all your thoughts at a glance. She frowned and looked at him. "Will you really send me back?" The shop owner said indifferently, "Sending you back to the future is not as difficult as you think, because the necessary props are already here. All you need is some power to activate it." Nero subconsciously glanced at the remote control on the table again. This was old Ha's thing, but according to the current situation, this was probably something that old Ha got from her boss in a future that was even more distant than her original time and space. Was the boss's aesthetic at that time so different to this extent? Was this remote control really ugly? You're saying that my boss specially sent me back here? Nero instantly frowned again, recalling what had happened in the past few days. Meeting Joe, meeting old Ha, meeting teacher Pulin, and finally going back to the past through the remote control because of the battle on the beach. Was it actually the boss who looked like a herbivore at home who was manipulating things behind the scenes? It's not the him you know. The shop owner at that time shook his head lightly. As expected, he was always aware of Nero's thoughts. This made Nero feel an inexplicable chill. She didn't show it, she just showed an innocent face as if she wanted to eat a lollipop. Then who is it? The shop owner, at that time said indifferently, or it's him who even he doesn't know. After all, under normal circumstances we can't know what we will look like in the future. My head hurts. Nero looked at him pitifully. The shop owner, at that time, still shook his head. He suddenly stood up, handed the remote control directly to Eleanor, and said indifferently, I'm tired and want to rest. Nero will stay here during this time. You're responsible for looking after her, Eleanor. Wait a minute, former shop owner, please make yourself clear. I can give you a special service. Nero tried to squeeze her breasts, but she realized that they were not as big as Eleanor's normal breasts, so she gave up. Only the figure of the shop owner at that time slowly went up to the upper floor of the shop and gradually disappeared. Nero sighed with an exaggerated, pitiful expression. She turned to look at Eleanor and begged, Sister, if you promise not to beat me to death, I'll tell you who I'll sleep with in the future, okay? I'll beat you to death. Eleanor looked at Nero and sneered. Then, she suddenly regained her elegant smile and chuckled. You're a future employee. How can I casually destroy the property of the shop? Since you're here, it just so happens that the shop lacks a servant. Work hard for the next few days. With that, Eleanor snapped her fingers, and Nero's clothes were taken out and replaced with a new set of maid's clothes. Nero blinked and realized that not only did she change her clothes, but she also had a broom and a trash spatula in her hands. If it was just cleaning this shop that could be seen with the naked eye, wouldn't it be more tiring than cleaning the manor? Not here. Eleanor chuckled again and snapped her fingers again. Everything in front of her changed instantly. They were now in a vast and huge forest. There were countless beasts and strange birds in the forest, and the old trees were entangled with their roots. The surrounding area was filled with the smell of rotten leaves and animal excrement, which was extremely pungent. This is a world fragment that I'm going to sell. You have to clean it up before handing it to the customer. Eleanor smiled and said, I'll leave it to you. If you don't clean it up, you won't be able to leave. Huh! Nero opened her mouth again and looked at the boundless forest around her. A feeling of despair that was comparable to copying books more than 200,000 times suddenly arose in her heart. Her tone of voice, why did it sound more and more like, oh, right? Eleanor suddenly said softly, You seem to be very weak now. Is it because of this remote control? If that's the case, this place is more or less dangerous for you. It's almost dark. I suggest you find a place to hide first. After all, it's more lively here at night. Nero. Nero suddenly opened her eyes wide. Wait, you really don't know you ye she-devil? Hey, don't go, don't go. She finally said the voice that was hidden in her heart. She-devil or something. But Eleanor had already disappeared. After shouting a few words, Nero finally gave up. She looked around and suddenly felt something dripping down from above. Sticky, huge balls of liquid. Nero subconsciously looked up and saw that on the huge old tree branches there were dozens of huge snake-like monsters with a length of 30 to 40 meters. They all looked down at her. Didn't you say it's more lively at night? I don't believe you. Nero shouted and immediately ran into the forest frantically. Above the forest, Miss Maid at that time frowned when she saw the figure running away in the forest through the tall and dense leaf. She muttered to herself, could it be that the next shop owner will really? This onyx soul, whose mouth was full of nonsense, was obviously talking nonsense. She instantly shook her head and turned to leave. Since the shop owner was resting, she also had some relatively free time. Anyway, she didn't need to prepare food for the shop owner. What a waste of my good cooking skills, she thought in her heart. The shop owner's room was relatively simple. There weren't many decorations, but there was a music box in front of the desk. The shop owner, at that time, sat in front of the desk and looked at it silently. He seemed to be thinking about something. Reversing time. What a big deal. The shop owner, at that time, shook his head slightly. I don't know how much it cost. Even now I don't know. What do you want to pass to me? The reason why he didn't send Nero away was that, even he at that time couldn't understand the meaning of this at this moment. There were obviously more and more questions in his heart, even to the point that he frowned. The biggest question had already emerged in his heart. Why? Why did the origin allow you to do this kind of thing? He suddenly opened the music box on the desk, and a clear sound slowly sounded. There were not only sound gears in the music box but also other things. Astonishingly, they were gold and silver cards. He reached out his hand and stroked the gold and silver cards, not saying anything. After a long time, a young girl's voice suddenly sounded in the room. Araya, the manager of the subworld number 003, is at your service. The shop owner, at that time, raised his head and asked indifferently, show me the data migration progress of the subworld number 003. I want to change something. Yes, the mansion of the underworld. The palace of the king of hell. Although he had already stayed in the palace under the arrangement of the maid GC, Hermes still hadn't seen the target he needed to pick up this time, the queen of hell. Since the king of hell said 3 days later, he naturally could only do it 3 days later. He couldn't beat the master of the mansion of the underworld. Anyway, if the Father God wanted to blame him, he could just push the blame to the king of hell. But it was obviously unrealistic to let the messenger stay in the room for 3 days. Hermes wasn't the kind of person who could stay calm. The messenger Hermes showed a smile at this time, then quietly left the room and came to the green grassland outside the palace. It was obviously quite a wonderful thing to be able to find such a mint grassland in the mansion of the underworld. Hermes lay on the grassland and leisurely played the flute. Soon after, a small figure climbed up the slope where the grassland was located with difficulty. When he came in front of Hermes, he was already covered in mud. Hermes put down the flute and glanced at him. This small figure was naturally the human child he found when he arrived. What a smart little guy. Hermes smiled slightly. I just gave you a hint, but you actually understood. How did you come out? Joe. Now that the king of hell had decided on his new name to be Poulin, he thought for a while and said, I saw that there was no one outside the room, so I walked out. Big brother, why did you call me here? I was just a little bored and happened to be curious about you. Hermes shrugged. Then child, can you tell me, why did you come back to the mansion of the underworld? As a human, the king of hell seems to treat you differently? Joe said, I don't know, he said that I am his child from now on. But I don't want to stay here at all, I want to go home. Big brother, can you take me away from here? Hermes suddenly opened his eyes wide and sat up in disbelief, saying in astonishment, that old guy Hades actually adopted you as his son? As soon as the words left his mouth, Hermes immediately covered his mouth. Then, he looked around with trepidation. When he saw that there was no one around, he secretly sighed in relief. Then, he pulled Joe and steered the flying wing boots to fly further away. Chapter 1492. Obviously, this was not an easy thing to understand. Maybe it was just the child's hysteria. Hermes thought, but if this is just a silly child, why did Pluto take Joe as his adopted son? This question gave rise to countless doubts in Hermes' heart. Based on his intuition, he subconsciously believed that every word Joe said was true. But the bad big sister? Mr. Smith? Mr. Death? Mr. Death must be talking about Pluto. Did Pluto personally come to the human world to bring this child to the underworld? Is there anything special about this child? More and more questions spurred Hermes to uncover the truth behind this. Ever since Hermes seized Mount Olympus from the second king of gods, his uncle, who had become Hades, seemed to be extremely dissatisfied with this. I want to see what secrets you have. Hermes looked directly into Joe's eyes. This suddenly made Joe feel dizzy, and then his consciousness became empty. He seemed to have lost the consciousness of his body, and his face became dull in an instant. Child, come to my side. Tell me what else Pluto said to you, Hermes whispered in Joe's ear at this time. But the messenger from Mount Olympus probably did not expect that the strange child in front of him had been known long ago. He did not even hide anything, and what he did at this time violated some of the restrictions imposed by Pluto when he decided to take Joe as his adopted son. At this time, a shadow slowly emerged behind Joe. Joe was still in a daze, but Hermes' expression changed slightly. Accompanied by the emotion of the shadow, it was the shadow of Pluto. The dense power of death surged towards Hermes from all directions. The power of this power of death was so strong that it even made Hermes think that he might very well die in the underworld. He had the protection of the divine king on him, but at this moment, the power of death was directly corroding his body. The lightning protection of the divine king was instantly destroyed. Has the power of Pluto surpassed? Hermes gasped, and his face was full of disbelief. How is this possible? No, I can't wait to bring Persephone back to the surface. I must bring this information back to Mount Olympus. Hermes didn't hesitate at all, nor did he have any intention of resisting the shadow of the underworld king. The wings on his soaring wing boots flapped slightly, and he rushed into the sky of the underworld. Unexpectedly, the phantom of the king of hell behind Joe suddenly reached out and grabbed Hermes, who was high up in the sky, by a large hand and slammed him down to the ground. The impact produced a loud sound and the ground collapsed. Hermes, who was in the center, not only vomited blood, his consciousness also became blurry. His body couldn't withstand such a throw. Hermes, whose heart was in turmoil, once again had a horrifying thought. The power of Hades might have really surpassed that of the master of Mount Olympus. He had been hiding this power in the underworld for so many years. At this time, under the cover of the phantom of the king of hell, Joe slowly floated to Hermes' side, looking down. Hermes knew that the Nether King was observing him through the shadow, so he forced out a seemingly relaxed smile. Nether King, my uncle, may I ask what I have done to anger you? I'm really sorry, maybe I haven't been to the underworld for too long, so I forgot some of the rules. Please forgive me, my dear Uncle Hades. Hermes, the god who is good at deception. The voice of Hades sounded from the phantom behind Joe. I need you to do something for me. Hermes frowned subconsciously. He knew that Hades was talking to him about a condition, and it was obviously a condition that he couldn't refuse, but he couldn't figure out why Hades mentioned that he was good at deception. My dear Uncle Hades, what can I do for you? Hermes rolled his eyes. You know, the Father is watching me all the time. I'm afraid I can't do it. Hades, the phantom, slowly spoke. His voice was filled with vicissitude. I have not seen the sunlight of the earth for a very, very long time. I have not seen the daytime of Mount Olympus. I have even gradually forgotten the feeling of warmth. Persephone's arrival only brought winter to the underworld. Hermes opened his mouth, somewhat uncertain and even a little frightened. Hades, do you want to leave the underworld? How can this be? Once you leave the underworld, the power of death will come to the human world, and the balance will be broken. The Father won't allow you to leave the underworld. Zeus, the phantom of Hades said indifferently. He won't allow me to leave the underworld, just like he won't allow the Sea King to appear on land. This is indeed a problem. Hermes quickly said, I heard that there is a mirror, no matter where you are, you can see what you want to see. Great Pluto, my Uncle Hades, you know how fast I am. I'll be able to get the mirror for you very soon. You can also see the sunlight of the earth in the underworld, and the daytime of Mount Olympus. The most beautiful scenery in the world will be presented in front of you one by one. Hermes, you still don't understand what I mean. Well, it may be a kind of happiness to not understand. At this time, the phantom of Hades suddenly separated from Joe's body, and then directly covered Hermes' body. It was like some kind of substance that invaded his body, little by little, through the pores of Hermes' divine body, and drilled into his body. Hermes was in great pain. His wails were like that of a criminal who was being punished. He was rolling on the ground, twitching as he endured unimaginable pain. Hades! Hades! Hermes, who was on the verge of collapse, screamed at this moment, "What do you want to do? Are you going to kill the god of Mount Olympus? Aren't you afraid that the thunder of the god of the sky will come to this land of death? Don't worry, no one will know that you are dead," the phantom of Hades said faintly, "because the next one to become Hermes will be me." Instantly, Hermes seemed to have thought of a huge conspiracy that seemed to have unknowingly covered the whole Mount Olympus. At the moment of his death, he had an intuition that surpassed the past. "Hades, are you going to impersonate me and enter Mount Olympus?" "Yes and no, that is a matter for the future." The phantom of Hades finally disappeared completely into Hermes' body. When the last bit of the shadow merged with Hermes' body, Hermes' anger and cries of pain all disappeared. He lay motionless on the cracked ground, and his eyes gradually became dim and lifeless. After a long time, Hermes slowly got up, lowered his head, and looked at his hands. Then, he moved his body and showed a strange smile. Without further ado, Hermes directly grabbed the back of Joe's collar, lifted him up, and then stepped on the flying wing boots and headed toward the palace of Hades. "Even I don't know your origin, but obviously, your arrival has brought me luck that even the goddess of fate wouldn't dare to give me." Hermes lowered his head to look at the unconscious Joe, and a strange smile appeared on his face again. "Little fellow, as my adopted son, you will inherit the throne of the king of hell. The underworld has always needed a master." Soon Hermes brought Joe back to the castle and didn't alarm many palace guards. But obviously the maid, Gc, who was taking care of Joe, was alerted. "Master Hermes, may I ask why you took young master out without permission?" And Gc stared at Hermes indifferently. "I hope you won't tell me what happened to young master." "Relax." Hermes smiled slightly. "He is just tired, so he fell asleep. If you don't believe me, you can check it yourself." The maid, Gc, took Joe over dubiously and carefully checked him. Hermes couldn't help but bitterly smile and said, "Is my trustworthiness so low? This really makes me sad, Gc." After all, Hermes' messenger is also the master of deceit and deception. The maid, Gc, said indifferently, "I just don't want the mission given to me by Hades to be messed up. Otherwise, I will be very tired and annoyed. Actually, I don't like to use deception." Hermes shook his head and said, "What I hope is that all sincerity can shine on the whole human world like the glory of the rising sun." The maid, Gc, didn't say anything. She just held Joe and left Hermes' side. Hermes chuckled at this moment as if he was quite satisfied that he could deceive Gc. When the maid, Gc, finally left, Hermes slowly turned around and looked at a place behind him. He looked for a while, and then walked over expressionlessly. At this moment, a black shadow slowly emerged from the place where there was no one. "I thought you were going to hide all the time." Hermes looked at Old Ha with a face full of curiosity. "It's really interesting. I actually feel the same power from your body as mine. Who are you?" The figure in front of Hermes was Old Ha, the Old Ha who met Nero. When he looked at Hermes, his expression was clearly not calm. Instead, it was complicated. Old Ha suddenly said to Hermes. Hell has always needed a master. Hermes, who had been invaded by Hades's shadow, frowned at this moment. Oh! Old Ha shook his head. His eyes suddenly became fierce and he said in a deep voice, Hades, you can't leave the underworld because once you leave, the balance will be broken. It will open a gap in the underworld and bring a huge disaster to the human world. At that time, the Pearl of the Sky will have a reason to lead the main gods on Mount Pantheon to suppress you. Everyone knows that. A Hermes sneered. Old Ha was neither in a hurry nor in a hurry, but his expression did not look relaxed. So you're looking for a substitute, a host that can accommodate your power of death and temporarily preserve the power of Nether King. That way, you can use Hermes's identity to do whatever you want on Mount Pantheon. That child is the host you've set your eyes on. Hermes looked at Old Ha in surprise and even sized him up. After a moment of silence, Hermes suddenly said, Although I don't know why you have the same power as me and are so much weaker, there's one thing I have to tell you. What? Old Ha could not help but frown. He even had a bad premonition in his heart. In fact, since Nero stole the remote control on the beach and then came to this underworld of the past, he had always had this bad premonition, a sense of fear. I actually didn't think so much, Hermes said slowly, but what you said reminded me that I can still do this. What a smart way to do it. This human child can definitely become the perfect host for the power of Hades. Oh my God, this way, I don't have to disguise myself as Hermes to enter Mount Pantheon. I can personally come to Mount Pantheon. Hearing Hermes' words, Old Ha's ears seemed to have been struck by a sudden clap of thunder. He looked at Hermes in front of him in fear and muttered to himself, How can this be? This is impossible. This is impossible. You didn't come up with this plan. How can this be me reminding you? No. Things shouldn't be like this. Things can't be like this. There must be something wrong. Something is wrong. At this time, Old Ha was like a madman. Sometimes he held his head and muttered to himself, and sometimes he laughed crazily. Suddenly, Old Ha's eyes turned red, and a pure but weak death power erupted from his body. Remote control. I want it back. I want to do it again. Remote control. Old Ha suddenly turned into black smoke and was about to rush out from a Hermes' eyes. But how could a Hermes let Old Ha do as he wished? Hermes let out a cold harumph. A similar but much stronger energy of death gushed out from a Hermes. The two similar energy of death instantly merged, but it was obvious that Hermes' energy of death was stronger. It devoured Old Ha's energy of death in an instant. Hermes waved his hand and pulled Old Ha in front of him. He looked at Old Ha carefully and said, It is indeed the divine power of Hades. Even the divinity is exactly the same. This is strange. Let go of me. Let me go. Old Ha struggled desperately. But a Hermes chuckled at this time. Let go of you? No. I suddenly have a better idea. My new son, Poulin, is a good vessel, but compared to him, you seem to be more suitable. Old Ha's body suddenly trembled. He realized that at this moment, everything was in chaos. Chapter 1493. 3 days after the underworld, messenger Hermes brought the underworld queen Persephone back from the underworld. When Persephone left the underworld and returned to the human world's winter ended and spring returned to the earth. The Lord of the Sky was very happy. He then ordered Hermes to bring Persephone directly to Mount Olympus. The underworld, the human world, and Mount Olympus seemed to have an insurmountable gap. The two sides were so far apart. Joe spent day after day in the underworld. He gradually forgot his original name and got used to the servants in the underworld palace calling him Prince Poulin, Prince of the Underworld King Hades. He really began to forget that his name was Joe. He even began to forget the voice of his father, Mr. Smith, and the appearance of his mother, Mrs. Deborah. He also began to forget the taste of his grandmother, Mrs. Ilura's borscht. He also forgot that there was once a bad big sister who always liked to bully him. Later, she threw him into this place and mysteriously disappeared. He gradually grew up. Spring went and autumn came, and another year of winter came. The underworld queen, who ate the pomegranate seed once again, stepped into the underworld palace when winter arrived. Prince Poulin was not ignorant. He knew that the underworld queen would spend an entire winter in the underworld like this every year. But before the end of the second winter, Prince Poulin did not meet Messenger Hermes again. Prince Poulin gradually grew up. When he was young and energetic, he became interested in the maid, GC, who had always taken care of him. He did not know what this feeling was. Later, when he chatted with the other underworld creatures in the underworld palace, Prince Poulin learned for the first time that this feeling was called love. It was a pure male liking for a woman. Prince Prin was terrified and uneasy. He didn't know what was going on with this feeling until he could gradually face his feelings and planned to formally confess to GC. But then, the war started. A war that swept through the entire Mount Olympus, the sea, the earth, and the underworld. It was an extremely long war, one in which the gods fell. You will replace me and become the new Nether King, my prince. In the middle of the war, Hades, who was seriously injured, called Prince Poulin, who had been baptized by the flames of war, in front of him. Inherit the name of Hades. You will complete the unification of legends. Whether it is the past, present, or future, the war was still going on. This was indeed an unusually long war. In human domain, the headquarters of the Magician Association, the Secret Arts Tower, the private library of the First Tower Master, Tower of Radiance. It was said that there were 103,000 magic books from different eras here, many of which were extinct. But compared to these precious magic books, the vampire girl Elizabeth, who had just moved in, was more interested in the miscellaneous books here. Apart from completing the daily set of magic lessons, the vampire girl's favorite thing to do when she had a break was to flip through all kinds of anecdotes in the miscellaneous section. Especially the introduction of the inhuman domain since its creation. Elizabeth? At this time, Zhong Luoyue came to the library with some food. It was a cup of very pure blood. Recently, for some reason, a large number of pure blood had suddenly appeared on the market. These pure blood were almost the same as the pure blood produced in the farms of the 13 clans, and the price was much lower than the normal price. Because the First Tower Master's closed-door student was a vampire, the higher-ups in the association already knew, so when this kind of cheap and high-quality pure blood appeared, the purchasing department carried out a large number of purchases. Zhong Luoyue was currently the personal maid of the First Tower Master's closed-door student, so she naturally received the supply of pure blood. Regarding the identity of a maid, the third daughter of the Zhong family obviously had no objection. As for why, probably only she herself would know. Oh, you're here. At this time, the vampire girl put down the book in her hand and looked at Zhong Luoyue, who came in. She smiled slightly. I think I forgot to eat again. Don't be too tired. Zhong Luoyue rubbed the vampire girl's head and took out the cup filled with blood from the tray. A wizard in the association who loves to eat specially made it. I tasted it and it tastes a bit like grapefruit. I don't know how he did it, but it made me feel like I got back my human sense of taste. The vampire girl blinked her eyes. She had been a vampire since birth, so she naturally didn't know the taste of human food. She couldn't wait to drink it, but she didn't know what it tasted like. She just felt that it was much better than the pure blood she usually drank. Slow down, don't rush. Don't read the book first. Zhong Luoyue shook her head and found that the little girl was surprisingly good at learning, but there was also etiquette when eating. She casually took the book in the little girl's hand and asked curiously, "What are you reading? You're so engrossed in it?" Why, Elizabeth, who was holding the cup, looked up and said, It's about the history before the formation of the inhuman domain. It's about the scholars' conjectures about the fall of the Greek gods, and some of the remnants that can be found. Zhong Luoyue curiously flipped a few pages and read softly. 3 long winters caused the earth to be tortured. Snow blew from all directions and froze the entire earth. Without the sun, the world lost its warmth. In the bone-chilling cold, suspicion and conflict, war and malice dominated the world. People all over the world used spears and swords to kill each other. Blood stained the earth red. Hungry beasts wandered in search of food. People no longer sympathized with each other or helped each other. Brothers and sisters killed each other. Father and son became enemies, killing each other in ugly competition. The whole world became very uneasy, and evil spread like a plague. What is this saying? I don't seem to remember such a period in the history of the European continent. Zhong Luoyue could not help but frown. If there was such a terrible war in human history, there should be records. When she was studying in the British University, she also minored in the history of the European continent, but she did not have any impression of this. It seems to be the current state of the world before the fall of the Greek gods. The little vampire licked the blood on her lips, but she did not lick it clean. Miss Sanyang saw it and picked up a handkerchief to carefully wipe the blood for her. This war broke out suddenly. The sea, the sky, the underworld, the earth, humans, and the gods all went into this war. From some of the remaining documents found, the situation at that time must have been extremely tragic. Miss Sanyang shook her head and said, "That's even more unreasonable. Where did such a world war happen?" Why, Elizabeth thought for a moment and said, "There is a speculation that the gods and humans in this war actually lived in a world similar to ours. It's a time cut from a period of our world's history." "You mean world fragments?" Zhong Luoyue was startled. Strictly speaking, her concept of the world fragments was still quite vague. This knowledge was also what she had heard during this period of time in the association. She was like a sponge, crazily absorbing all the knowledge that could be absorbed. The little vampire nodded and said, "Yes, the scholar who wrote this book believes that the divine kingdom of the Greek gods, which is the inhuman realm that we live in now, and the sea, earth, and the underworld mentioned in the war should be a connected, complete, and huge world fragment. And this world fragment was finally divided because of the war that ended the world. So, there are a few other dimensions similar to the inhuman realm, the sea, the earth, and the underworld?" Zhong Luoyue could not help but stick out her tongue, and then quickly calmed down. Recently, her cognition and 3 views had been constantly refreshed, and she had long been used to the current bizarre and variegated world. This is just a scholar's guess, and it hasn't been confirmed yet. Why, Elizabeth shook her head. Zhong Luoyue blinked and read a few more pages. Then she said, "If these gods are really so powerful, how did they die in the end? Can gods be killed?" she said. "According to some of the documents excavated from the inhuman realm, it seems that in the middle and later stages of the war, a very terrifying weapon appeared on the battlefield. Because of the appearance of this weapon, all living beings and gods died one after another. In the end, not many survived." Zhong Luoyue opened her mouth. "A weapon? What weapon?" The little girl said, "I don't know what it is exactly. I'm looking at these documents to see if there are any similar records, but I can't find any. The only thing I know is that this weapon can bring death, and it's called Hades." "Hades? Hades?" Miss San asked in surprise. The vampire girl shook her head and said, "It's not referring to the master of the underworld, but the name of this weapon. It's called Hades." Finally, Miss San lost interest in these distant and specious myths and history that had not been confirmed. She put the book on the table and said, "Why, Elizabeth, I'm going out later. I've already prepared dinner, and the servant will send it to you. Remember to eat." Where are you going?" the vampire girl asked casually. She spent most of her time in the library, and relatively speaking, she did not know what Zhong Luoyue usually did. Nothing. Zhong Luoyue smiled and said, I heard that there's a black market auction today, and I just want to go and see it. It seems that something amazing has appeared in this black market auction, and the secret pharmacists in the association seem to have gone crazy. They even went around borrowing money to participate in the auction. Even I was asked, is there anything good? Why, Lisabeth was not very interested in this. She lowered her head and continued to read the unfinished document. Zhong Luoyue tidied up and said casually, it seems to be the work of a legendary secret pharmacist. I heard that any work of this legendary secret pharmacist can be sold for a sky-high price. Oh, then be careful. Why, Lisabeth nodded, but it was not clear if she heard it. However, when Zhong Luoyue was about to leave, the little girl suddenly took out a card and said, there are 10 million secret crystals in this card. Take a look and buy whatever you want. I'm sorry that I didn't accompany you properly during this period of time. Looking at the little girl casually taking out 10 million secret crystals, Miss San could not help but open her mouth. Why did this scene feel so familiar? Because I didn't accompany you properly. Take it and buy something? What the hell is this? However, in the face of this huge sum of money, the third young lady of the Zhong family silently accepted it. Although this third young lady was a descendant of the Zhong family of China and had a huge amount of wealth, that wealth was worthless in the inhuman domain. Therefore, Miss San could be said to be penniless in the inhuman realm. She was a poor person. Why, Lisabeth, how did you get so many secret crystals? Miss San could not help but ask in the end, I remember you said that your grandfather didn't leave you so much inheritance? Why, Lisabeth did not even turn her head and said, oh, my teacher gave it to me. He said it's pocket money. Haha, fear, Zhong Luoyue. This is the real power of money. Miss San secretly smiled bitterly. When she thought of the power of money, she naturally thought of the guy who always had a smile on his face. She thought of the short few hours she spent with him in the underground maze of the gambling god manor. She shook her head and took a deep breath to clear her mind. With tens of millions of secret crystals in her arms, Miss San suddenly realized that she could do a lot of things. Although she had already become a vampire, the third Miss had not been idle during her days in the association. With her skills, it was easy for her to become familiar with many magicians and magi, and she even passed some tests for free. The results were that, as a vampire, the third Miss potential was only average. At the very most, she could reach the level of an ordinary elite among the vampires. This made Miss San, who had always been an excellent person, feel as if she was doused with a bucket of cold water. She suddenly became confused about the future. She did not want to rely on Lisabeth's protection for the rest of her life. There's no such thing as sincerity and unconditional feelings. The third young mistress looked at the carriage that was about to leave for the black market auction and muttered to herself, if you want to obtain sincerity, then you have to make yourself equal to the other party, whether she was an inhuman or not. As a descendant of a big family, there was a concept that had been deeply rooted in Miss San's bones. That concept was called equal social status. Chapter 1494. The third Miss was riding in the car of a student of a senior secret apothecary in the Secret Arts Tower. This senior secret apothecary was clearly a fan of the mysterious legendary secret apothecary and the author of the auction item. Thus, he had already prepared a huge sum of money for emergencies, and this huge sum of money was obtained from his student, or rather, from the student's parent. The family of this senior secret apothecary's student was in the secret medicine business. This could be said to be a very reasonable alliance between the strong. The third Miss, who had been in the workplace for many years, was used to this kind of relationship. If there's a chance, I'll take you to the Sea of God to take a look. Legend has it that it's the bathing place of the gods before they fell. Maybe we'll find something interesting there. Thank you, Fantas. The third Miss smiled at the handsome man in front of her. I also want to go and take a look, but I need Miss Elizabeth's approval. This handsome man, the senior secret apothecary's student. The motive behind such a passionate action was obvious. Unlike the fear humans had towards non-humans in the non-human domain, it was normal for non-humans to be together with non-humans. Although it was rare for the spouse to be a vampire, it wasn't impossible. Since she had a suitor, and a capable one at that, why not make use of it? Children who grew up in the business world would rarely reject this. Would she be worried that Fantas would act recklessly? The answer was no. Elizabeth was the first Tower Master's student and she was Elizabeth's personal maid. This was a very protective identity. So no matter what kind of thoughts this Fantas had behind his handsome and straightforward face, he wouldn't show it and would always maintain his current refined and courteous manner. It's all right, I think Miss Elizabeth is a magnanimous person. Fantas smiled slightly and softly said to Zhong Luoyue, perhaps you can introduce me to Miss Elizabeth. I believe she'll be moved by my sincerity. He's going to reveal his true motives so soon. Sure enough, he's still too young. The third Miss secretly sighed in her heart. Purely judging from the perspective of an aristocratic family's child, this Fantas who had some assets in his family was really unpresentable. That's wonderful, Fantas. Third Miss revealed a gratified expression at this moment. You're such a sincere person, Miss Elizabeth will definitely appreciate you, Fantas. However, you might need to wait for some time. As the Radiance Pagoda Master has given Miss Elizabeth a rather heavy learning task, she is not allowed to meet with outsiders during this period of time. This is truly a pity. Fantas revealed a slightly disappointed expression. Still too inexperienced. The Zhong family's third Miss casually glanced at him and then said in a soft and weak voice, I think that the Radiance Tower's Tower Master doesn't like Miss Elizabeth coming into contact with people outside the association so early and wants to protect Miss Elizabeth. But how can you be a bad man, Fantas? I will definitely find an opportunity for you. Oh, you really are my angel. Fantas suddenly became emotional as he looked at Zhong Luoyue with deep affection, as if he wanted to kiss her. At this time, Zhong Luoyue unhurriedly used the fan in her hand to block Fantas' lips and said with a charming smile, Don't forget that I'm a vampire. Aren't you afraid that I'll bite your lips? Just thinking about it is very exciting. Fantas' eyes suddenly lit up as some kind of desire spread in his eyes without any concealment. Zhong Luoyue said indifferently, Fantas, you're a sincere person, so please don't make me feel that you're the same as other men who only want a night of pleasure. If that's the case, I'll feel very disappointed. Right now, her eyes were filled with grief, her expression seemed to be filled with grief, and even her voice sounded like she was crying and complaining. Her soft and moving appearance made Fantas feel like an ant on a hot pit. But he really couldn't figure out what this woman was thinking. His family's intention was to let him get hold of this maid and then come into contact with Miss Elizabeth. This was basically a hot topic among the younger generation in the Magician Association. They were mainly interested in Elizabeth, who was behind Zhong Luoyue. It wasn't that Fantas didn't have any competitors. On the contrary, he had a lot of competitors. Obviously, he wasn't willing to lower the favorability that he worked so hard to raise and push the prey that was about to be in his hands to other hunters. He could only restrain the evil fire in his body and return to his cultured and elegant appearance. He said affectionately, Believe me, you're so charming. All the men in the world will make the same mistake as me. All the men in the world? Not necessarily. At least, that person probably wouldn't. Zhong Luoyue smiled faintly. When the desire in Fantas' eyes subsided, she was actually secretly relieved. This couldn't be compared to her past. Now that she was really alone, it was like walking on thin ice. If she wasn't careful, she was afraid that she would fall here. Fortunately, even if he was an inhuman with extraordinary powers, his personality didn't seem to be much different from that of a normal person. Or rather, it was because this was the inhuman domain, and because there was the restriction of the Magician Association that these guys with extraordinary powers could still behave themselves. Fantas, you're really the best man I've ever seen. The third Miss smiled sweetly at this moment and immediately said without leaving a trace, not like Sean, who's always so tough. Sean? Fantas snorted at this moment and said disdainfully, he's just a country bumpkin nouveau riche whose family does black market business. If he dares to mess around, you must tell me. Jean Louis said worriedly, is it okay, Fantas? I heard that Sean's family has a lot of influence in the black market of the inhuman domain. That's his family's influence, not Sean's. Fantas said contemptuously, this ignorant and incompetent guy doesn't have a high position in his family. His family's business in the black market will probably only be inherited by his brother. Of course, the black market business is still a black market business after all, it can't see the light at all. It's not like our family which has a formal license of the association. There's no comparison between the two. That's true. The third Miss smiled and said, I'm starting to look forward to the following auction. It's the first time I've seen an auction in the inhuman domain. Fantas, can you tell me about the main event of this auction? I've only heard about it, but I don't know much about it. Of course. Fantas said with a smile, actually, there's nothing particularly eye-catching in this auction. My family and my teacher originally didn't plan to participate. But suddenly, there was a rumor that the legendary witch would be adding a bottle of 4-star recovery potion. That's why the auction became so lively, and they even made it an invitation. It's so mysterious. It's just a bottle of 4-star secret medicine. Why would it make people so crazy? Jean Louis really didn't understand. Moreover, she was very interested. She had always been very interested in the high value of this kind of product. It was completely different from the boring topic of discussing the fall of the Greek gods with Elizabeth. You don't know, but let's not talk about the fact that many famous secret pharmacists are fans of the legendary witch. Just the fact that the secret medicine personally made by the legendary witch can't be replicated is enough to make people scramble like duck. Fantas said seriously. Jean Louis didn't understand and said, since it can't be replicated, then even if you get it, you can only use it once. You don't seem to know how to make people go crazy? Fantas laughed and said, of course there's a way. The 4-star medicine that appeared in this auction can only be considered high quality. But it can't be denied that it came from the hands of the legendary witch. Because, as long as it's a medicine made by the legendary witch, its effect is at least 30% higher than a medicine of the same level. That is, although it's only a 4-star medicine, its effect is better than a 5-star medicine on the market. Do you understand now? You want to crack the secret of the legendary witch's medicine making. Jean Louis keenly felt the real intention of these guys. Fantas nodded and said, using the same materials and the same costs to produce a higher level product. The profit in this can be said to be immeasurable. More importantly, if the legendary witch's method can be used on other high-level medicines, think about it. How much wealth would that be? How could the third Miss not understand the problem of production cost? She was probably much clearer than this Fantas. This legendary witch is really powerful. I don't know who she is. It seems that very few people know her origin? Fantas nodded and said with a sigh, yes, regarding the legendary witch, there are very few people who know. Even if there are people who know, they themselves know very little. What everyone is familiar with is probably the name of the legendary witch. Pansy. What did you say? The third Miss of the Jean family couldn't help but stare blankly at this time. I said, Pansy. Fantas said with astonishment, this is the name that the legendary witch uses. You don't know? This is the first time I've heard of it. Jean Louis shook her head. But there was a rather strange feeling in her heart. Pansy. She remembered that when she was still in the Torito clan castle, the woman with the paper bag mask seemed to have called the woman beside Luochu the pansy. Could it be that it was the same person? But this pansy master, didn't she become famous more than 30 years ago? Zhong Liu's heart suddenly moved at this time and suddenly asked coldly, Fantas, do you know the origin of the person who auctioned the legendary witch's works this time? Fantas thought for a while and said, I'm not very clear about the details, but I heard that it seems to be an independent witch who opened a magic house. She came from Britain. You see, Britain has been sanctioned by Europe, and even the magicians and witches there can only do business in the black market. How pitiful! Could it be that coincidental? Could this witch be the witch Maria, who was wearing the paper bag headgear? The black market auction soon began. It was in a private mansion in the neutral chaotic area of the inhuman domain. Just as Fantas had said, the quality of the goods in this auction was indeed average. It had already started for more than half of the time, but there were actually quite a few unsold bids. Almost 70% of the guests were here for the legendary witch's work, and among these 70% guests, most of them were secret pharmacists or merchants who were involved in the secret medicine business. The organizer probably understood that the remaining goods couldn't attract these people who were only interested in the secret medicine, so he directly proposed the final item. I believe that everyone can't wait anymore. Now let's officially enter the final auction. The auctioneer picked up the mallet in his hand and fiercely knocked on the podium, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone immediately quieted down and looked at the final item that was about to appear. Like most of the guests, when they heard that the final item was going to appear, a bored woman who was cutting her toenails in a private room in the auction venue quickly raised her head. That's right. Dragging it out, they already took it out. They made me wait for so long. Her eyes were filled with resentment. It was Ms. Maria. Watching the hostess carefully take out the tray with the secret medicine, Ms. Witch's eyes seemed to see piles of secret crystals being thrown at her, and her heart couldn't help but beat faster. Enough chit-chat. This bottle of legendary witch's work has been appraised by professionals, and it's definitely authentic. Also, it's a 4-star potion with a 5-star effect. What's more, this potion was completed recently. I believe that everyone knows the value of this potion, right? So, the starting price is 500,000 secret crystals, and the price must be no less than 50,000 secret crystals each time. Is there anyone who wants to bid? The auctioneer fiercely knocked on the podium. 600,000, 700,000, 800,000, 1 million, 3 million. Looking at the rapidly increasing number, Miss Witch's breathing also gradually quickened. It was as if there was a strong man pushing her from behind, continuously sending her to the peak of happiness. 5 million, 6 million, 8 million. Ms. Witch's face was flushed, and her hands tightly grasped the armrests of the chair. 9 million, 10 million, 11 million. At this moment, Ms. Witch forcefully straightened her legs. She forcefully straightened her legs, and her toes were fiercely curled together. 13 million and 3 million, 15 million, 20 million. Ms. Witch directly stood up at this moment, and her legs were quietly clamped together. Her eyes were spitting fire, and she was panting heavily, sweating profusely. 30 million, 40 million, 45 million, 50 million, 50 million going once, 50 million going twice, 50 million going thrice. Sold. As the deal of 50 million was completed, the auctioneer who made the sky-high price also became excited at this moment. He held the mallet and waved it. Congratulations to guest number 76 for winning this legendary witch's paw. Crack! The moment the auctioneer waved the mallet and turned around, the mallet directly hit the bottle of the secret medicine, breaking the bottle directly. The broken bottle splashed the potion on the breasts of the hostess, but no one paid attention to the hostess's appearance at this moment. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time, and the auction house instantly became strangely quiet. The auctioneer stood there dumbstruck, his arms trembling non-stop. With a thud, it came from one of the rooms, which Maria fell to the ground with tears streaming down her face. Instantly lost. It was a huge fortune. Chapter 1495. This bottle of potion is fake. It must be fake. It must be fake. All of a sudden, in the silent auction hall, a sharp and mournful cry of a woman rang out. The degree of mournfulness of this cry made many of the men present involuntarily think of those women who had been pressed under their bodies before. It seemed that at the last moment, they would always let out a high-pitched cry similar to a decibel. Of course, in such a serious occasion, under the watchful eyes of so many big shots in the industry, naturally no one would do such shameful things in the private room. This was not the little plain, after all. How could there be so many idiotic rich kids wandering around outside? Therefore, this must be a crazy fan of the legendary witch, who couldn't accept that the witch's potion was destroyed by the auctioneer's wooden mallet. It must be like this. That's right, this must be fake. It must be fake. I will never admit that the work of the legendary witch will be destroyed by an auctioneer's wooden mallet. I will never accept it. This is definitely an insult to the legendary witch. It wasn't certain whether it was an insult or not. Looking at the crowd that gradually became excited, Zhong Luoyue, who came with Fantas, also had a private room, couldn't help but frown. The enthusiasm of these big shots in the secret medicine industry for the legendary witch's work had even exceeded her expectations. Fantas, what would the auction organizer do in such a situation? The third miss couldn't help but ask curiously. Of course, it wasn't just purely out of curiosity, but also because she wanted to know the rules of the market in the inhuman domain. There must be a lot of rules that were different from human society. Fantas thought for a while and smiled bitterly. Even if you ask like this, I'm afraid I don't know how to answer you. After all, this kind of situation didn't seem to have happened before. How could the bottle be destroyed like this? After all, this is the work of the legendary witch. It's really a pity and too ridiculous. 50 million secret crystals. I think this time the Shang-En family is really going to vomit blood. Shang-En was the child of the black market merchant who competed with Fantas to pursue the third miss. Fantas was naturally overjoyed in this situation, but he had to maintain his poise. I can wait for the auction to announce how to deal with it. Haha, probably the boss here doesn't know what to think now. Fantas laughed lightly. But suddenly, his head was hit hard by someone. But this young master didn't dare to get angry because the person who hit his head wasn't an outsider, but his teacher, a high-level secret medicine master in the association. You bastard, how can you still laugh at this? The legendary witch's potion, a secret medicine that is like a holy object, was destroyed by an auctioneer. This is simply a disaster for the secret medicine industry. This is a sad day. You bastard, you actually laughed. I'll kill you. Teacher. The third miss, who couldn't bear to see this scene, shook her head and quietly left the room. Actually, although this Fantas was like an embroidered pillow, he had the advantage of being easy to control. But this kind of character was really but the voice of the woman who screamed just now. The third miss frowned and subconsciously walked towards the room where the woman screamed. In the room, the atmosphere was unbearably cold. The organizer of the auction was urgently communicating with the owner of the witch's secret medicine. It was Witch Maria. I'm serious. 50 million secret crystals, you have to compensate me. Otherwise, I'll plant sunflower seeds behind your boss's butt. Believe me, I'll turn him into a walking sunflower. Not only your boss, but you too. Your whole auction house is a sunflower. Don't you know who I am? At this moment, the enraged demoness stepped on the table and grabbed the steward's collar with both hands. She lifted the old steward up and revealed the face of an evil person. "I know who you are, Miss Maria. You're the Witch of Destruction, the witch who single-handedly defeated the evil dragon poachers. Who in the black market hasn't heard of your name? Please let me go, I'm so old, I can't stand the torture of sunflower seeds." The white-haired manager kept begging for mercy. Maria pushed him away and crossed her arms. "I don't care, you have to compensate me for my loss. Otherwise, I'll plant sunflower seeds all over your butt." The manager nervously wiped his cold sweat and wrangled, "Miss Maria, you can't blame us for this. How could we let such a valuable thing be broken by a wooden mallet? You said that our auctioneer is just an ordinary guy, not a strength-type hero like the legendary hero Kroloa. What do you mean? You want to wrangle with me, right?" Maria immediately snorted coldly and said, "According to what you're saying, could it be that the things I gave you were all lies? Don't forget that when I took out the potion, 3 of your secret pharmacists were there to verify it." Maria sneered, "You checked it, packed it, and took it away from me. Now, it's broken by your people, and you dare to doubt me? Are you tired of living?" "That's not what we mean, Miss Maria." The manager's bitter face almost squeezed out tears. "It's just that we're running a small business. Where can we get 50 million secret crystals for you in such a short time? Even if you sell our boss, he can't get so much money." Maria stopped talking and looked at the old man coldly. She reached into her collar and took out a handful of sunflower seed. 50 million seeds. You can choose for yourself." "Miss Maria, I'm so old." Stop, 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 stop. I know, I'll discuss it with the big boss. I'll give you a satisfactory answer." "Stop. F***ck off, I'll give you half an hour." At this moment, the old steward was halfway through joining the guild. He lifted his pants, which had been dragged halfway down his body, and scrambled out of the door of the private room. "Old thing, if you're half a step late, I'll stuff your ass full." At this moment, Maria slowly exhaled. Then, she looked like she was about to cry, "My 50 million! 50 million!" While Miss Witch was feeling sad, the door of the private room suddenly opened. Maria shivered and said angrily, "Old thing, how dare you come back without money?" "It's you?" The person who pushed open the door and entered was third Miss Zhong. "Zhong Luoyue. I just saw an old gentleman in a hurry with his pants up. Well, do you have this kind of hobby?" Zhong Luoyue frowned slightly. Maria opened her mouth and suddenly found that she couldn't explain this matter, so she didn't explain. Instead, she thought for a while and said, "Why are you here?" "You're here, which means that Miss Vampire is also nearby. Thank you so much for what you did last time." "It's really you?" Zhong Luoyue nodded at this time. "I wasn't sure before." Maria couldn't help but be stunned, and then she remembered that when she met this woman in front of her, she had been wearing a craft paper bag. So, what she said at the beginning was a means to test me. She was really a person with a lot of bad intentions. Maria couldn't help but glare at Zhong Luoyue. When she first met Zhong Luoyue, she argued for a long time about how to escape, so she didn't want to deal with this tough woman. Zhong Luoyue probably guessed Maria's thoughts. At this time, she gently closed the door and walked in. "I'll bring your thanks to Elizabeth. She's not here. I came to this auction with someone else, and I didn't know you were here." "I see." Maria nodded and then lost interest. She didn't care about meeting acquaintances in this place. In fact, she met many acquaintances in this auction, but she didn't want to take the initiative to greet anyone. Her mind was now full of the 50 million secret crystals. There was one thing that the old manager was right about. How could a good potion be broken so easily? The bottles that secret pharmacists used to store potions were usually specially made. Not to mention using a wooden mallet, even if a high-grade potion bottle was hit with a big hammer, it might not break. Maria was sure that the potion she handed over was genuine. If it wasn't genuine, she wouldn't have sent it here to be auctioned and ruined her own reputation. Could it be that in the auction, someone secretly tampered with the pansy master's work that was originally put up for auction and turned it into a dragon instead? Miss Witch calmed down at this time. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that this possibility was very high. After all, this wasn't an ordinary valuable item, but the work of the legendary witch. The potion contained the secret that could raise the potion's effect by 1 star. This secret would probably make all secret pharmacists go crazy. Are you thinking about someone secretly switching your potion? Zhong Luoyue suddenly said at this time. How did you know? Maria subconsciously raised her head, only to see this hateful woman looking at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. She knew that she had a big mouth after all. She couldn't help but frown when she was casually tricked into speaking. The third miss said indifferently, "Actually, there's nothing special about it. After something like this happened, any normal person would think in this way. Just look at the increase in price in the auction just now, and you'll know how precious this bottle of medicine is." Do you know something? Maria said directly. I lost a lot this time, but if you have any clues that can help me recover my losses, I can give you 5%. 3% of the final value of the potion this time. 20%. Anything less than this is off the table, the third lady said indifferently at this time. Were your ancestors pirates? Miss Witch looked at her in disbelief, as if she was looking at a rare animal. My ancestors were soldiers who made great contributions to the nation. The third lady's eyes were indifferent, but there was a sense of respect in her expression. Maria was silent for a while before she shook her head and said, 20% is too much. I worked very hard to get this potion. 10% is the most I can give you, and it's because you helped me leave the castle. If it's more than this amount, I won't talk about it. Even without your clues, I can still solve this matter. It's just a matter of time. Deal. Zhong Luoyue said directly at this time, 10% is no problem, but I want to add a condition. What condition? Maria asked carefully. Zhong Luoyue smiled and said, let's be friends. Miss Witch. Maria looked at Zhong Luoyue as if she was meeting her for the first time, and suddenly said, You're a businessman? I used to be. The third lady smiled at this time, and then said, From now on, I'm still a businessman. Okay. What should we do next? Maria was also a straightforward person. Zhong Luoyue said, To be honest, what do you think the probability of success is if you want to ask for compensation from the owner of this auction house like this? Basically 0. Maria said casually, The owner of this auction house is famous for being stingy. If it wasn't for the fact that this auction house has the best reputation, I would be too lazy to cooperate with them. Other auction houses' fees are 5% lower than this auction house's. Yes, it is indeed impossible to make the other party hand over 50 million secret crystals obediently. The third lady nodded. Because this transaction didn't happen in the end, the investor who won the potion won't be stupid enough to hand over the secret crystals. I think the auction house is probably in a terrible situation in front of that investor now. Don't say things that even a child can think of. It makes me feel like I'm throwing the 10% profit into the ocean. Maria shook her head. The third lady shook her head and waved at Maria. Come here, I'll tell you in detail what you should do. You better have a good idea. Miss Witch said indifferently, My sunflower seed, it doesn't matter where it is planted. I promise it will make you go to heaven. I won't let you down. Zhong Luoyue smiled. This smile was pure and not pretentious, but it made Maria feel like she had fallen into a trap. What did you say? Brittle attribute? In a luxurious room inside the auction house, the owner of the auction house was listening to the words of a magician beside him. This magician was a freelance magician who didn't belong to the Magician Association. The owner of the auction house spent a lot of money to invite this magician. Yes, this bottle that contains the potion has the brittle attribute engraved on the inside of the bottle. The consultant nodded at this time. This will make the special bottle used to contain the potion into an ordinary bottle. It will even be more fragile and will break upon collision. This is why the mallet will break with a casual knock. Of course, your auctioneer will knock the bottle, which is probably your misfortune. The face of the owner of the auction house twitched slightly. He had already sent the auctioneer backstage to be whipped. But who would engrave such a boring spell in such a precious potion bottle? I don't know about this. The consultant shrugged and said casually, maybe the person who gave the potion didn't intend to give it to others, or maybe he didn't do it willingly. Chapter 1496. For the owner of the auction house, it didn't matter who engraved the magic spell on the potion bottle. What was important was that this thing was broken under his watch. Moreover, it was done under the watchful eyes of the public. Even if he wanted to deny it, he couldn't. Moreover, the reason why he could stand firm in the black market was because of his good reputation. But if he had to pay 50 million secret crystals in one go, it would be like letting out blood. People who did business knew that assets didn't equal to liquid funds. The auction house had a large business, but in fact, it had many goods that were hard to sell. The issue of compensation was the biggest headache for the owner of the auction house. Did she really say that? After hearing the report of the manager, the owner of the auction house couldn't help but move his body. In the end, he chose to stand up from the chair. Otherwise, he would always feel very unnatural. Yes, boss. The owner of the auction house shook his head. Although the item was sold, it hasn't been officially handed over. We didn't take the money from the buyer. 50 million is equivalent to asking us to pay the full amount. This is impossible. The old manager frowned. He thought that the owner of the auction house, who was famous for being stingy, didn't just want to pay the base price of the auction item? If so, that which would definitely be furious. The manager's eyes couldn't help but become strange. That's not what I mean. The owner of the auction house coughed twice awkwardly. I'm talking about bartering. Using treasures of the same value as the compensation. You go to the warehouse and find a few things to estimate the price. If the price is not too different, take them out and send them to the witch. The manager opened his mouth. Why did he feel like he had dropped an egg to return a piece of vegetable? How did this guy come up with such a stingy idea? Estimate? How could there be an accurate estimate of the value of the items taken out for auction? A piece of junk could be sold at a high price if it was exaggerated. Boss, this witch is also a businesswoman. She's not easy to fool, right? The manager felt that it was necessary to remind him. But the owner of the auction house said, You think I don't know? I'm not stupid. Do I really let you pick out the junk? You go and pick out a few magic accessories of good quality. Then put in the thing we bought last month. That thing is a hot potato anyway. I'm worried about how to deal with it. Then, all right. The old steward thought for a moment and finally nodded. I think it's a good idea. Now that things have come to this, it's useless for that witch to make a fuss. I'll go and discuss it with her. Just as the auction owner was about to approve it, someone hurried in from outside and handed over a note, saying that it was sent by Maria. The auctioneer hurriedly took it and glanced at it. Then, his expression became a little strange. The old steward and the highly paid consultant in the room couldn't help but look over curiously. What did she write? The boss of the auction house frowned at first, but then he gradually relaxed. He smiled and said, It seems that this witch is not like the rumors. She doesn't fight at the slightest disagreement. Take a look. The boss of the auction house spread the note in front of them. They came over to take a look. The old steward was stunned after reading it. It can be done like this. It turned out that the note was written with Maria's solution. This time, the work of the legendary witch was finally proven to be a fake. As for why it could fool the appraisal of the auction house, it was entirely because the goods were enchanted with a very high-level illusion that even exceeded the ability of the appraiser. That was why it deceived everyone. This time, if it weren't for the auctioneer's mallet, It would have caused great losses to both the auction house and the buyer. This meant that Maria directly gave up 50 million secret crystals as compensation. But there were two additional requirements. First, the compensation was 8 million secret crystals. Second, the auction house had to deduct 6% of the total profit from every auction until the 50 million secret crystals were deducted. Isn't she afraid that we'll go back on our word? The steward asked curiously. But we have to sign a contract. The auctioneer smiled bitterly. Besides, even if we don't sign the contract, you may be able to go back on your word. You can run away and hide in the real world. She may not be able to find you for the rest of her life. But I can't. If I run away, what about my business? What about my family? What about the business that I've worked so hard to manage for so many years? You have to tell me. All right, let's do as she says. Who was the one who said that this witch only knew how to be rash? She's simply a snake beauty. The old steward nodded and immediately said, Do you want to go to the storeroom and order something? The boss of the auction thought for a while and said, Yes, order 2 more items and send them to the customer who bid for the elixir. A guy who can easily take out 50 million secret crystals will definitely be a big customer of ours in the future. We have to seize the opportunity. As for the other thing, well, you can send it to Maria. Take it as a return of the favor. As for whether that thing is a treasure or trash in her hands, it depends on her luck. Damn, this Maria is really something. She's so smart. If I didn't already have a wife, I would definitely marry her. TSK, this woman's figure is really good. Hee, what's this? This thing is worth 8 million secret crystals? Maria couldn't help but frown. She looked at the thing that the old steward sent over like an old dog. It was a green bracelet that looked like it was made of jade. Of course not. The old steward was still smiling like a dog's head. Miss Maria, the 8 million secret crystals you asked for are here. This is an anonymous secret crystal card, please count it. As the saying goes, a bird in the hand is worth more than 10 birds in the bush. Maria put away the secret crystal card first. Although the difference in her heart was still huge, it was not completely unacceptable. Because the old steward had already said that the bottle was engraved with the attribute of a fragile. Maria didn't even say anything. Based on what she had experienced with Master Pansy, it seemed that he could do it. Of course he could do it. The master of the pansy. What about this thing? Maria looked at the bracelet in front of her again. The old manager's saliva flew everywhere as he said, This thing is a treasure that our big boss has just received recently. Its origin is not small. This was found in a relic of the inhuman domain. I think you know the predecessor of the inhuman domain. This bracelet might be something that the gods used in the Greek pantheon era. If you can unlock the secret of this bracelet, I'm afraid its value will be higher than the work of the legendary witch. Our boss sincerely wants to make friends with you, Miss Maria. I don't believe you. Maria snorted coldly. Who doesn't know that your boss is famous for being stingy? An item from the gods in the Greek pantheon era? This is probably something that was fished out from a stinking ditch. The old steward was still smiling like a spring breeze. Maria shook her head and waved her hand rather disinterestedly. Okay, go back and tell your boss that I'll come to collect the money on time next month. Don't go back on your word, or you'll have to bear the consequences. Sure. Seeing the old steward open the door and leave with a sigh of relief. After closing the door, the third lady of the Zhong family walked out from behind the screen with a smile. She walked to Maria and stretched out her hand. Here, these 1 million secret crystals are yours. Miss Witch waved her hand generously at this moment. The third lady couldn't help but frown. 10%. Maria shrugged. I'll pay you another 1 million next month after I collect the money. Divide it into 5 payments. The third lady had to shake her head. She wouldn't pursue this issue and lower her status. She glanced at the bracelet on the table and picked it up casually. Maria hurriedly said with a sharp voice. This thing is worth at least 3 million. 3 million. You heard it, this is an item from the gods in the Greek pantheon era? The third lady sneered and threw the bracelet back. Miss Witch had to smile embarrassedly. This is for you, for you. Well, this is for Miss Vampire. Take it as a thank you gift for last time. Zhong Luoyue took the bracelet slowly at this time. She wasn't interested in this thing, but she suddenly remembered that Elizabeth seemed to be very interested in the Greek pantheon era, so she planned to give it to her. However, she came out empty-handed tonight and was wearing a formal dress. There was no place to hide anything on her body, so she simply wore the bracelet on her wrist. This is my messenger number in the inhuman domain. Maria gave a badge at this time and then wrote a note. This is my phone number in the modern world. Let's make friends? Third young miss smiled and accepted the gifts. But before she left, she suddenly turned around and looked at Maria. She smiled mysteriously and said, You won't lose out if you make friends with me. Elizabeth is now the inner disciple of Radiance Tower Master. The door was still closed, but Maria couldn't help but feel a little puzzled, thinking about the last words Zhong Luoyue said. Master of Radiance Tower, Master of Radiance Tower. Who is Radiance? F***CK. The first Tower Master of the Magician Association, the first person in the inhuman domain. Radiance. Lady Witch, who jumped up abruptly, had the urge to lift her skirt and chase after Zhong Luoyue. She could just give him 5 million secret crystals. What's that on your wrist? On the carriage returning to the association's headquarters, the noble young Master Fontes quickly noticed the strange bracelet on the third lady's wrist and became curious. Zhong Luoyue's eyes turned and said half-truthfully, This bracelet seems to be a treasure prepared for the next auction. When I went out to the washroom, I met an acquaintance who gave it to me. An item from an auction, an acquaintance. This made it easy for the noble young Master Fontes to connect the dots. His expression changed imperceptibly, then he smiled and said, This bracelet looks simple and grand, it must be very precious. The person who gave this gift is quite considerate. The third lady nodded with a smile. It can be considered as a proof of friendship. Fontes's pupil shrank slightly, then his smile became more brilliant. Is that so? But I think you is more suitable to wear this necklace. This magic necklace, in addition to being made with rubies, also has several defensive tactics. It's most suitable for a beauty like you. It was probably prepared early. Fontes took out a box with both hands. So beautiful. It was indeed beautiful. With this kind of unique design, even Zhong Luoyue, who was used to seeing jewelry, couldn't help but be a little moved. Can I put it on for you personally? Fontes said with a burning gaze. You really are a gentleman, Fontes. The third lady's expression didn't change. In the end, she slowly lifted the long hair behind her back and turned around, but at the same time, she seemed to casually use the folding fan to cover her chest. I'll just take it as scattering some meat, she thought. Zhong Luoyue had always asked herself, after becoming an inhuman, what capital did she have? What she had was the only capital a woman had. Fontes immediately smiled a little proudly. He didn't mind Zhong Luoyue's little defensive action. The key was to close the distance. As long as this distance was constant, the prey naturally wouldn't be able to escape. There was no need to rush. He understood the principle of boiling a frog in warm water. But just as he picked up the necklace and was about to put it on for Zhong Luoyue, the carriage suddenly shook violently. Then, with a loud bang, the carriage was directly blown up into the sky. Fontes could feel the fluctuation of magic. The moment the carriage exploded, he activated the defense of the necklace in time, so he wasn't injured. But he was also affected by the impact of the explosion and was directly thrown more than 10 meters away. Zhong Luoyue wasn't far from him. Are you okay? No, just a little dizzy. Who is this? On the greenish-black flagstone road, a guy wearing a black cloak was seen standing in the air, probably relying on some kind of tactic or the ability of an item, male. He used the cold eyes hidden under the mask to look down, sizing up Fantas and Zhong Luoyue. In the next moment, without any warning, he directly rushed towards Zhong Luoyue. After all, Zhong Luoyue had lived in the army for a period of time, so she was much calmer than the average rich girl. At this time, she didn't panic. Facing the attack of the black-cloaked man, she instantly summoned the immature vampire power, and her strength suddenly increased. She jumped up and barely dodged the sneak attack of the black-cloaked man. Vampire? The black-cloaked man seemed to be a bit surprised and immediately said in a low voice, "Where did this newborn vampire come from?" "Hell King. Isn't something that your 13 families can touch." "What?" Third Miss expressed that she didn't understand what the other party was saying. But at this time, Fantas's bodyguards who heard the news had already rushed over and surrounded the black-cloaked man with their fastest speed. Not only these bodyguards, but Fantas's teacher who came with them this time, the association's high-level secret pharmacist, was also alarmed. "I'm the Magician Association's high-level secret pharmacist Vich. Who are you? How dare you openly attack the people of the Magician Association?" Fantas's teacher shouted at this time. The black-cloaked man looked around, and after taking a deep look at Zhong Luoyue, he suddenly rushed into the sky. "People of the Magician Association, go back and tell your Radiance Tower's master we won't let this thief go. The domain of the gods, we'll take it back." The black-cloaked man disappeared into the night sky, leaving behind a group of people who were at a loss. Zhong Luoyue looked at the direction where the mysterious black-cloaked man disappeared, and her intuition told her that the other party seemed to be coming for her, the thing in her hand. She subconsciously wanted to take off the bracelet on her hand, but this strange bracelet couldn't be taken off no matter what. She couldn't help but think of what the mysterious black-cloaked man said to her. Hell King? Could it be that this bracelet was really a treasure? Chapter 1497. Because the attack happened in the area directly under the jurisdiction of the Magician Association, the association's patrolling guards quickly came over after hearing the news. As the person directly involved, Fantas, his disciple, and Zhong Luoyue were taking notes with Captain Lin of the patrol guards. The Divine Realm? Did the person who attacked you really mention the Divine Realm? The captain of the patrol guards suddenly became serious. Master Vic? Of course, I'm not doubting you. It's just that this is a serious matter, so we need to be careful. A high-level pharmacist already had a very high status. Ordinary, inhuman, couldn't come into contact with legendary heroes and witches, so the captain was very polite at this time. You've done well, my captain. Master Vich nodded with a smile. However, I can guarantee that the mysterious black-cloaked man mentioned the Divine Realm before he left. It seems like they really are the remnants of the Divine Realm. Captain, did something happen? The captain nodded and said, in fact, since the Michael Club invasion last week, those guys seem to have become active. Not only this time, but in the past few days, there have been reports of their traces in different areas. My God! Are these guys planning to do something while the association hasn't settled down yet? Master Vic couldn't help but frown. Although it wasn't publicized and there was no official explanation, the news of the death of the Mithril Tower's owner had already spread like wildfire. Everyone knew about it. Yes, the threat from the Michael Association hasn't been eliminated yet, and the remaining evil here has started to stir up trouble again. The inhuman domain is really troubled. The captain shook his head. But no matter what, we still have the invincible First Tower Master, so we don't have to worry about these clowns. These guys seem to be blindly worshipping Elizabeth's teacher. The third lady silently looked at them praising Hui Yao and couldn't help but have a strange feeling. What if this pillar of support is broken? Or is it gone? She was suddenly shocked by her own thoughts at this time, but she hid it well. At least, Fantas, who was beside her, didn't pay too much attention to her subtle changes at this time. By the way, Why did that mysterious person attack her in the beginning? The captain suddenly looked at Zhong Luoyue, his eyes filled with doubt. I'm talking about this young lady. The third young miss thought that this was probably related to the bracelet on her wrist. Just as she was pondering how she should answer, Fontes unexpectedly stood up and said, "It's like this. You may not know, Captain. This is Miss Yu. She is Radiance Pagoda Master's student and Miss Elizabeth's best friend. I think the person who attacked her must have done so because of this. Perhaps he even wanted to kidnap Miss Yu and then hurt Miss Elizabeth before finally dealing a blow to the Radiance Pagoda Master." I see. Hearing this, the captain's expression changed slightly. If that's the case, there is indeed such a possibility. How about this, we will escort you all the way back. Thank you, Captain. Fontes smiled and nodded, then gently looked at Zhong Luoyue. His small eyes seemed to be saying, "Look, no matter what trouble it is, I can solve it for you. Choosing me is definitely the right choice." How could the third miss not guess what this young master meant? However, she really didn't want to attract too much trouble. Thus, with Fontes's interruption, and this captain actually following this train of thought, she didn't feel like saying anything else. Speak less and do more, before she had the ability to protect herself. Afterwards, everyone chatted for a bit. Finally, the captain had his subordinates stay behind to clean up the scene and brought people to escort them back. Because Fontes's carriage had already been blown up, he and the third young miss directly sat in Master Vic's carriage on the way back. "Don't be afraid, those remnants shouldn't dare to come again tonight," Master Vic said indifferently. The third young miss took advantage of this suitable time to ask, "Master, may I ask what the remnants you are talking about are?" Master Vic casually said, "Actually, it's not a secret, so it's fine to tell you. These remnants are actually the predecessor of the inhuman domain, the survivors of a ruined Greek god's domain. Back then, our Radiance Tower's owner discovered this place and had the idea of transforming it to create a pure land for all the Inhumans. Of course, there were some obstructions in the process. Actually, we tried to communicate with them in the past, hoping to coexist peacefully. And, basically all the invaders in human history had this idea." The third young miss didn't express any opinions. "In the beginning, they caused a lot of trouble for us, but it gradually calmed down," Master Vic slowly said. "Later on, these remnants split into two different opinions. One side wanted to coexist peacefully with us and even joined us. You know the Scarlet Flame Tower's owner and the Ice Tower's owner, right? They were the remnants of the divine domain. In fact, there are many areas in the inhuman domain that were created to provide for these original residents. Of course, most of them are fantasy creatures like demon beasts." The third young miss thought for a bit and said, "Then the other side, are they the ones who attacked us tonight?" Master Vic nodded and said, "The other side has actually disappeared for a long time. Now, it seems that they still haven't given up. Back then, this divine domain was ruined and the space kept losing. It was clearly on the path to destruction and would be devoured by the void sooner or later. If it wasn't for the Radiance Tower's owner doing everything he could to pick it up and build the current stable system, what divine domain would there be? However, these people don't know how to be grateful. They call themselves the noble god race, and even want to rule us and make us their slaves. What a rotten idea. They are the descendants of the Greek gods." The third young miss frowned. At this moment, Fontes lightly laughed and said, "What descendants of the gods? They are just the descendants of some servants or demigods who lived on the mountain of the gods. It's just that the gods disappeared, and they replaced them, calling themselves the new god race. Yes, the Socius god race, this is what they call themselves after establishing themselves. In the past, they would secretly assassinate some of the big shots of our association to attack us. This time, they ambushed us. They must have had their eyes on you. After all, your relationship with the Radiance Tower's owner isn't shallow. Didn't you hear what the black-robed man said before leaving? This is clearly a new round of provocation to us. Zhong Luoyue knew that Fantas had probably misunderstood something. Even Master Vic, who was beside her, agreed with this misunderstanding. However, she didn't plan to say anything and temporarily let some things rot in her stomach. Inhuman domain. Mysterious area. Even after the Radiance Tower had restored the system of the Greek god's divine domain, there were still some places that couldn't be completely covered. For example, the mysterious crack that existed under the 13 clans' territory. Another example was this huge forest filled with trees. A man wearing a black cloak was rapidly moving through the forest. Not long after, he arrived at the entrance of a karst cave. He went all the way into the cave and went underground. As a member of the Socius god race, this man always wanted to restore the glory of the era of the gods. He wanted to beat the invaders and the traitors to the ground. O great divine master of darkness! Your servant is here to praise you. The man stopped in front of a translucent stone wall in the depths of the karst cave. He could see that inside the stone wall there seemed to be a huge black shadow. He couldn't see its true appearance. He called it the god of darkness. What's the matter that disturbed my rest? The voice of the shadow inside the stone wall was deep and cold. Accompanying its voice, a whistling cold wind blew in the karst cave. This black-robed man waved his hand. A 40 centimeters long and 30 centimeters wide box appeared in his palm. He opened the box in front of the shadow and saw that there were 6 jade bracelets inside. My God, these are the keys that my clansmen have recently collected. A gray fireball suddenly condensed in front of the stone wall. Then, the fireball shot out and directly exploded the box. Even the 6 bracelets in the box were blown into pieces. God? The black-robed man was shocked. The shadow inside the stone wall said in a deep voice, Hell King is a weapon made with the purest death energy. The key that activates a Hell King must have the same death energy. I can feel this because I once. None of this is true. Continue to look for it, you must find it. The black-robed man said, My God, does Hell King really exist? I'm not doubting you, I just can't imagine what a weapon that can destroy gods looks like. It's normal that you don't know. The shadow inside the stone wall said indifferently, without experiencing that era, you can't imagine how terrifying it is. I will never forget that day when a Hell King broke through the realm of gods with terrifying power. If it wasn't for the realm of gods being broken through and some powerful beings and creatures fell from the unknown void, the realm of gods wouldn't have been destroyed. Perhaps now, the mountain of gods still exists, but it has changed its name. I feel it. I recently felt a trace of Hell King's aura again. It has appeared again, but the feeling is intermittent and I can't pinpoint its exact location. But one thing is for sure, we must find the key to activate Hell King. This will be the key to defeating the Magician Association. My God! I, Mayor Lotta, swear with my life that I will definitely find the key to Hell King. The black-robed man. Mayor Lotta said with his head lowered. At this moment, the shadow in the stone wall suddenly trembled, and the whole karst cave also trembled. The real world, present world, the aura of Hell King has appeared again, I can feel it, although it's very weak. It's present world. Go. Find Hell King for me. As he said that, a crystal shot out from the stone wall. Mayor Lotta stepped forward and held the crystal in his hand. This crystal can lead you to Hell King. This time you can't fail. The shadow said with a deep voice. If it wasn't for this damn seal, I would have personally gone to find it. Mayor Lotta will definitely find Hell King, and the key to control Hell King, and release my god from this seal, I swear with my life. Mayor Lotta's eyes gradually became fanatical. I really can't open it. Association, Radiance Tower Master's private magic tower. Elizabeth's resting area. The third lady didn't hide anything from Elizabeth when she came back. Instead, she told Elizabeth everything that happened that night, only omitting the content of the agreement with Maria. This thing, is it really something from the era of the Greek gods? The third lady looked a little worried. She saw Maria holding the bracelet for a while and nothing happened, so she directly picked it up. She didn't expect that after wearing it on her wrist, she couldn't take it off. The vampire girl took a magnifying glass and carefully looked at the pattern on the bracelet. There seems to be something written on it. It seems to be some kind of text. I think I have seen it somewhere. Where? The third lady quickly asked. It seems to be in teacher's library. Elizabeth thought for a moment before bringing Zhong Luoyue into the library. She then started flipping through the piles of books. These were the precious books that Elizabeth had finished reading during this period of time. This child is really attentive. She is so attentive to chase after him. Women who are impulsive for love can erupt with terrible effort. Zhong Luoyue shook her head inwardly, thinking that she would never do such things for a man in her life. She would only work so hard for herself, to make herself more outstanding. Found it. Just when the third lady was secretly distracted, the vampire girl cried out in surprise. At this time, she was holding a big book that was half her height on the mountain of books. Then she spread her small palm-sized wings and slowly flew down. This is the text. This bracelet is engraved with the text of the Titan gods. Titan. The Titan gods were the gods who ruled the world before the Greek gods. Does Cronus know? He is the lord of the sky in the Greek gods, the father of Hades and the Sea King. He is the king of the Titan gods. The third lady glanced at the pile of miscellaneous books. Thinking that she would have to make a living in the inhuman domain in the future, it seemed that she really needed to cram some knowledge. She shook her head and said, "Can you decipher the text engraved on this bracelet?" The vampire girl immediately opened the book that was half her height and flipped through the pages as if she was looking up a dictionary. Zhong Luoyue silently counted the time, feeling uneasy in her heart. It was not until late at night that the vampire girl yawned and looked up at Zhong Luoyue and said, I have translated it. What did it say?" Zhong Luoyue quickly asked. Elizabeth thought for a while and said, "It seems to be a name engraved on it. Pulin Hades." Pulin Hades? Zhong Luoyue frowned, raised the bracelet in her hand, and read it again. Nothing happened. Chapter 1498. After half a night, she finally managed to translate the text, but she did not expect that it was just a name. Pulin Hades. Although this name was crowned with the name of Hades, one of the Greek gods, when Zhong Luoyue read the name, the bracelet did not change at all. "Why, Elizabeth, can you teach me the correct pronunciation of these words?" Zhong Luoyue suddenly asked. Perhaps in another way, translating the content was not enough. The important thing was to know the correct pronunciation. This was also the power of language that some of the ancient wizards in the association worship. They believed that ancient words contained great power. But the vampire girl said that she could only find the meaning of these words based on the appearance of these words in the book, and this book did not have any similar pronunciation note. Is there no other way? Zhong Luoyue looked at the bracelet that could not be taken off. If this thing could not be taken off, it was not a particularly troublesome matter. It was just that it was not easy to match when wearing clothes. But matching clothes was a small matter. The key was that this thing seemed to attract the attack of the Socius gods. Third Miss did not want to put herself in such a dangerous position. "Maybe I can ask teacher tomorrow." Why, Elizabeth thought at this time and said, "This book about the study of the Titan language was written by teacher himself. He may know the reading of the Titan language. Maybe, about the bracelet, we can talk to teacher directly." This was not a bad idea, or rather, this was the best way. Or, you can first figure out the reading of the Titan language. Zhong Luoyue shook her head. "The master of the Radiance Tower is very busy. I don't want to disturb him because of this small matter. If we really have no way to solve the problem, how about we go to him?" Of course, there are still many capable masters in the association. I can ask them how to open this bracelet tomorrow. Most importantly, it was going to be dawn soon. Zhong Luoyue was really sleepy at this time. She was not like Elizabeth, who was just a newborn vampire. She was supposed to undergo her first transformation in the 13 clans, but in the end, it was ruined by the rebellion of the golden dragon Fafnir. Zhong Luoyue naturally transformed on the first day she came to the association. The result was obvious. She didn't have a good foundation, so her transformation wasn't ideal. That was why her potential was determined to be average. In short, she was still a weak vampire, so she couldn't resist the sleepiness brought by the day. Okay, I'm a little sleepy too. I read a lot of books today. Elizabeth then said goodbye to Zhong Luoyue and returned to her coffin. Zhong Luoyue sneaked a peek at the little girl's coffin. The design of the coffin was actually similar to hers. They were all prepared by the people inside the association. But unlike the simplicity of his own coffin, the interior of Elizabeth's coffin was obviously much more girly. Most importantly, there was a large pillow inside, and there was a crooked human face embroidered on the pillow. Naturally, there was no need to say who this human face belonged to. Brother Luochio, good night. Elizabeth's soft voice faintly came from the closed coffin. Zhong Luoyue shook her head and climbed into the coffin herself. A new day soon came in the inhuman domain. Some people had already woken up to work, but some had just fallen asleep. The third young lady had a dream. She dreamed that she had become a giant beast. The giant beast had a huge body, as huge as the Titans recorded in the ancient books. It tore the sky, crushed the earth, and even broke through the world. Outside the broken world, there was a void. Then, a large number of monsters poured in through the gap in the world. The monsters crazily tore and bit the creatures on the ground, and even flew towards the giant beast. She, who had turned into a giant beast, immediately fought with these monsters. They kept fighting and killing, as if there was no end. Finally, all the creatures on the ground seemed to have died. Blood covered the ground, and gray snow fell from the sky. Then, the sky cracked open. The world also cracked open. It was as if there was only death left in the surroundings. Everything was silent. Why didn't I see your little tail today? There was no Poulin's class in the morning class. There were a total of 2 slightly boring theory classes in the morning. The classes in the School of Theology were already boring. As a result, after 2 classes, most of the students in the class had fallen asleep in the snow. The teacher did not care about it. When the bell rang, he directly walked out of the classroom. At this time, Claudia walked quickly to Luochio's side and sat down. Little tail? Boss Luo blinked. That girl. Claudia shrugged and said, she always follows behind you. Isn't she like a tail? Boss Luo smiled. He could not tell Claudia that Miss Maid was now in another world. She has something to do, so she asked for leave for a few days. She asked for leave on her second day here. What kind of gods are you? Claudia smiled bitterly. After leaving the Butterfly Society, yesterday, she went to check it out of curiosity. She found out that this society was actually established the day before yesterday, and it was officially launched yesterday. That was not all. The most important thing was that it was so exquisitely decorated in such a short time. It made Claudia wonder if the 2 freshmen's families sold oil. Why are you looking for me? Boss Luo did not care about Claudia's guess at this time. He asked while packing up the textbooks. Claudia frowned, lowered her voice, and asked rather anxiously, what happened yesterday? Well, Miss Claudia, it's already lunchtime. Boss Luo smiled and said, why don't we talk about this in my department? I think we need a quieter environment. Claudia heard this and nodded at first. Then, she carefully covered her chest with her textbooks and said, we can only talk about business. I'm not interested in anything else. Also, you're not my type. Isn't it better to talk in a quieter place? Boss Luo thought about it. I didn't seem to have said anything out of line, right? Don't worry. Lucio shook his head and said, I don't have any romantic thoughts about Miss Claudia. I'm just interested in the background behind this matter. That's good. Claudia nodded. I just want to study hard in university. I don't want to waste time on boring hormones. Then, this way please. Let's go to the Butterfly Society. Boss Luo smiled and walked in front as if he was leading the way for her. Claudia watched Lucio walk away and hurriedly pushed her glasses up. Then, she took a deep breath and hugged her textbooks tightly in front of her chest. Then, she lowered her head and hurriedly followed. To be honest, she had never had the chance to be alone with a male of her age. Wait for me. Claudia hurriedly called out. At this time, something flashed by the corridor outside the window. Claudia subconsciously looked at it. It seemed to be a black cat? Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me? The Butterfly Society. After opening the window on the upper floor of the old school building, one could see a small man-made forest in front of them. The old school building was surrounded by the shade of the trees. It was quite quiet and cool. Claudia sat on the sofa more reserved than yesterday. Lucio was personally making tea for her. I don't usually make these, so the taste might not be very good. Lucio smiled and said, Please don't mind. Claudia always felt that she was definitely the iron virgin that her classmates talked about. Not only was she not interested in men and women, but she also rejected all kinds of celebrity-chasing activities. Compared to the popular supermodels, she obviously felt that the mathematics professors were more handsome and charming. But at this time, she had to admit that this new student from the East had a very nice smile. In her heart, she temporarily crossed out the conjectures about Lucio such as nouveau riche son, playboy who only knows how to play. He may have more women than he reads. And so on, leaving a comprehensive impression of the guy with a good-looking smile. Let's get back to business. Claudia pushed her glasses and looked out of the window. She said, Don't waste time on drinking tea. Actually, water is better. Clear water is the source of life. Boss Luo smiled. He had always been used to drinking clear water, but later he became used to drinking tea. Someone said that it only took 3 days to get used to something like this. He must have let Miss Maid get used to it by far more than this number. Miss Claudia. Lucio thought at this time and said, I don't know. Have you ever thought of going to the place where your father, Professor Siegiatu, inspected? Claudia frowned. You mean, my father's disappearance is really related to his research project? Lucio shook his head and said, I don't recommend using a definite tone now, Miss Claudia. I mean, maybe we can find some clues there. Claudia thought about it and said, Actually, I have thought about this before. But the problem is, I don't know where my father and his team went to investigate. I've looked through all the information in his office, but I still can't find any clues. Lucio said, About the inspection location, I have found it. What? Claudia was shocked. She slapped the table and stood up. You found it? How did you find it? Lucio said, Actually, according to normal means, as long as you investigate the information of your father's entry and exit, it is easy to find it, isn't it? You are right. Claudia's frown deepened. That's usually the case, but the police have already investigated this. But they couldn't find any information about my father. So, I suspect that my father may have used a fake passport to enter and leave the country. So, how did you do it? Even the police can't do it? Lucio suddenly said, Miss Claudia, do you think we are very mysterious? Claudia nodded without thinking and said bluntly, You give me the feeling that you are not ordinary people. You are indeed very mysterious. You even did something that the police couldn't do for half a year in one night. So, where did you come from? Mysterious is right. Lucio smiled and said, Your father, Professor Siegiatu, also mysteriously disappeared. And now, you found us mysterious to investigate this matter, making everything seem confusing. Miss Claudia, don't you think this is a great experience? Then, when I have half a foot in the coffin, I can program this matter into a fantasy story to deceive my little granddaughter or grandson who has just become interested in mysterious matters, right? Claudia suddenly rolled her eyes. I can't say for the time being whether you are mysterious or not, but I can be sure of one thing now. You are very likely crazy. Are you relaxed now? Luochu picked up a cube of sugar and put it into Claudia's cup. At this moment, this student Claudia had clearly forgotten his initial restraint. Rolling his eyes and looking annoyed, he appeared to be very energetic and natural. Claudia opened her mouth, but in the end, she shook her head and sat down again. Can you tell me how you got the information? Business secret. I can't tell you for the time being. Luochu shook his head. Claudia rolled her eyes again. Then you can at least tell me where my father went for the postgraduate entrance exam, right? Luochu said softly, Egypt. Claudia opened his mouth, then gritted his teeth and stood up abruptly. Wait a minute. I'll go out for a while. What's the matter? Boss Luo asked, puzzled. Claudia said directly, I'm going to ask for leave now. Since it's so far away in Egypt, do you think we can go back and forth in a day? Without waiting for Luochu's response, Claudia rushed out of the door of the Butterfly Society. She was the type to act quickly. Luochu smiled and walked to the window with the teacup, looking at the small forest outside the old school building. The place further away was actually a cliff, and further away from the cliff was the sea. Luochu didn't intend to put Claudia's matter aside or ignore it because of Nero's sudden disappearance. Nero's disappearance might be some information about his future self. In the end, Claudia's matter was also related to Golden Pupil, the person who translated the message left behind by the previous owner of the shop. The previous owner. Past. Luochu whispered to himself, future me? Future, current me. Present. Trinity? At this moment, the sea in the distance suddenly dimmed a little. Boss Luo looked at it and suddenly closed the window. The sea suddenly dimmed, but it quickly returned to its original state. At this time, a figure appeared on the sea or on the sea. It was a man wearing a black cloak and holding a gray crystal in his hand, Mylada. Feeling the information from the gray crystal, Mylada moved his gaze and finally locked his eyes on the seaside town in front of him. Is it here? Pluto! Hashtag PS. 154th. Chapter 1499. He looked around the sea and saw an island near the shore. He quickly landed on the island. Then, Mylada threw out the coordinates of the inhuman domain. Of course, these were the illegal coordinates that he bought from the black market. As the coordinates were opened, people wearing black robes walked out of the whirlpool one after another. They were the core members of the Socius God clan and had the same ideals as Mylada. There were a total of 3 Socius God clan members who came out. Mylada looked at the arrival of his 3 companions and said in a low voice, The crystal given by the Lord of Gods has shown the location. The target should be in the small town in front. One of the God clan members suddenly asked in confusion, This is the modern world. Why would Pluto appear here? Mylada thought for a while and said, When a Pluto appeared, he ended the war between the gods and broke the divine realm. The divine realm was split, and the sea, land, and Hades that used to be there are still missing. Later, when the beasts invaded, the broken divine realm was even worse. However, Pluto disappeared. Perhaps when the divine realm was broken, Pluto fell into the modern world for some reason. This was the only possibility that Mylada could think of. Just like what the shadow in the stone wall said, he didn't really experience the War of the Gods. He was only a descendant of the survivors of the war and was only trying to restore the glory of his ancestors. As the descendant of Ares, the great god of war of the ancient Greek gods, how could he let himself be mediocre? It took him a lot of effort to find the cave through various means and clues. He found the shadow sealed in the stone wall under the cave, a god who had survived the generations of the gods, a real god. The god of darkness promised him that when he helped him escape from the stone wall, he would be able to activate the bloodline of the god of war's ancestors and become a new god of war. A great god. That's right, finding Pluto is the most important thing. The members of the Socius god clan nodded and were about to move. However, my Lotta suddenly waved his hand, turned around, and said indifferently, "It seems that we have just arrived in the afterlife, and there is already someone who welcomes us. Are you not going to come out?" At this moment, my Lotta was facing an enormous reef at the edge of the island. His voice was low and deep. After waiting quietly for a moment, he didn't see any movement. Marlotta coldly snorted and waved his hand. A strong light suddenly shot out and instantly blasted the huge reef in front of him into pieces. 3 beautiful naked women were currently hugging each other in extreme terror. Clearly, they were greatly frightened. This is a siren? A Soth god frowned when he saw the peculiar features of the 3 naked women. There are sirens in the modern realm? My Lotta shook his head and said with a cold gaze, "I don't know. Perhaps they are the descendants of the sirens who secretly escaped here during the Great War of the Age of the Gods. Looking at them, they should not have reached adulthood yet. What should we do with them?" My Lotta thought for a moment and said, "Legend has it that the ancestors of the sirens were once the maids of the queen of the underworld. Come to think of it, these sirens can be considered as collateral relatives of the Soth god clan. Let's capture them first. When we take back the divine realm, we will grant them official identities of the Soth god clan. We need our own people." Understood. A Soth god nodded and immediately walked quickly towards the 3 siren sisters who were curled up in fear. They didn't even know where the 4 black-robed men came from. At this moment, when they saw one of them walking towards them, they instinctively felt danger. This reminded them of the time when their parents were killed by monster hunters and they were chased all the way. They couldn't help but feel terrified. At this time, the 3 sirens screamed in horror. This was the most powerful weapon of the underage sirens, the voice that could confuse humans. Quite energetic, but unfortunately, you are not an adult yet. The Soth god who walked towards them chuckled. This little bit of charming voice is useless to me. Give up resistance, we are not your enemies. We will be your companions. Don't come over. We don't know you. They retreated a little in fear and wanted to dive back into the sea, but unexpectedly, the way was blocked by another Soth god clan member. They could only be trapped in the ditch of the reef, not knowing what to do. What poor children! The Soth god clan member shook his head. The ancestors of the sirens were of noble blood, but I didn't expect the descendants of the sirens to be reduced to this. Come, child, come into our arms. The youngest siren suddenly opened her mouth and shot a water arrow directly at the Soth god clan member. The water arrow did not hurt him, but it cut his clothes. I like energetic children. The Soth god clan member whose clothes were cut sneered and suddenly reached out and grabbed the little siren who spat the water arrow. He held the little siren's throat and smiled even wider. Because energetic children are more interesting when trained. From now on, you are under my care. I will teach you to be an excellent warrior. Let me go. Let me go. The frightened little siren could only struggle at this time. The Soth god clan member shook his head and said, "You are too weak. You should eat human flesh. Human flesh is the source of your power. Especially you, from now on, eat at least 3 human beings every day." I don't want to, I don't want to. Mr. Poulin will be angry. Let me go. The little siren sobbed and said, "Let me go. Mr. Poulin will not let you go. Mr. Poulin." The Soth god clan member was suddenly curious. Who is this? Is he also a siren? Or is he your elder? At this moment, the little siren tightly pursed her mouth. Under the stern gazes of her 2 sisters, the little siren suddenly realized that she shouldn't have said Mr. Prin's name. "Humph! You don't want to say?" The Soth God clan member who caught the little siren sneered. "What a disobedient child! I don't mind disciplining you from now on. I will let you know that children should listen to their elders." He still held the little siren's neck tightly and lifted her up high. The other two sirens were filled with grief and indignation, and their faces were full of hatred. They wanted to save the little siren, but they were directly pressed to the ground by another Soth God clan member. "Be quiet. If you are disobedient, you will be next." The two sirens could only watch in despair as their youngest sister hovered between life and death. "Still don't want to say it? Then I'll have to use more strength." The Soth God clan member who caught the little siren snorted. But at this time, a hand suddenly reached out and grabbed his arm. He was surprised to find that the one who grabbed his arm was one of the leaders, Mylada. Mylada said indifferently, "They will be the children of the God clan in the future. You can be strict, but don't go too far. It doesn't matter who Poulin is. Don't forget our purpose this time. Don't make trouble for me." "Okay." He shrugged, loosened his hand, and threw the little siren back to her sisters. He sneered at her and said, "From now on, I will adopt you, little one." At this time, a gray light ball suddenly appeared above the heads of Mylada and the three Soth gods. The sudden appearance of the gray light ball instantly attracted their attention. The ball of light began to slowly descend at an extremely slow speed. Mylada and his companions couldn't help but watch in confusion. But just as the ball of light was about to hit the ground, Mylada was suddenly startled. He loudly shouted, "Scatter!" Boom! The gray light ball that fell to the ground expanded in an instant. After expanding, it directly swallowed the reefs of the island, creating a huge pit with a diameter of nearly 10 meters. Mylada and his companions dodged in time. But they were also affected by the impact. The Soth God clan member who had threatened to adopt the little siren, his black robe was completely eroded, and his body was completely exposed. He was a monster with a human body and a snake tail. His gray skin was covered with spots, and his face was ugly. It seems that he is a descendant of Ikarna, but I don't know which descendant left his bloodline. But, if he wants to adopt the three of them, his weak bloodline is not enough. An indifferent voice suddenly came. The Soth God clan member who had been exposed looked at the source of the voice. He saw a man in a black suit, with a top hat covering his eyes and nose, and his hands clasped behind his back. Soth, who had a human body and a snake tail, snorted coldly. "Sneaky, deceiving fellow. Are you the Mr. Poulin these little sirens are talking about?" Unexpectedly, the man in the black suit shook his head and didn't speak. "I don't care who you are. Don't pretend to be mysterious in front of me." The Soth god with a human body and a snake tail snorted coldly. Suddenly, his neck stretched out, his head reached in front of the man in the black suit. "I don't like living things approaching me." The man in the black suit shook his head slightly. The head that stretched out. The head's ferocious face suddenly froze, completely froze, his body also became motionless. The strange appearance of this Soth god with a human body and a snake tail caused the expressions of his companions to change. Mylada frowned. Just as he was about to attack, this Soth god with a human body and a snake tail suddenly turned into black ashes. Mylada turned pale with fright, and almost without any consideration, he instinctively jumped off the island and crashed into the sea. He didn't even care about the reactions of his other two companions. At this time, seeing Mylada escape without hesitation, the two Soth gods looked at each other and tacitly fled in two different directions. Unfortunately, they were half a step slower. The moment they moved, two huge shadow arms stretched out from the ground and directly grabbed them. Finally, the shadow arms dragged the two Soth gods into the ground and disappeared. At this time, the sea water was hitting the reef on the shore, and the water splashed on the faces of the three sirens. They woke up from their absent-mindedness, and looked at the man in the black suit with respect and fear. More of it was fear. "It's all right." The man in the black suit turned around. "But you will encounter other troubles one day if you live here. Go to the depths of the sea, the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, where you can live." "Please wait a minute." The man in the black suit was about to leave, but the youngest siren hurriedly stopped him. Are you Mr. Poulin?" He didn't stop, and his voice gradually faded away. "I'm not the Poulin you know." The black suit had disappeared. The little siren was puzzled at this time. She looked at her two sisters and said subconsciously, "But I saw. This is clearly Mr. Poulin's appearance. What should we do now?" The second sister of the three sirens frowned. Obviously she didn't consider the third sister's question. The eldest siren frowned and finally gritted her teeth. "That man said that there is a suitable place for us to live in the depths of the sea. Should we go and have a look? Can we trust him?" The second sister hesitated. The eldest sister looked around and smiled bitterly. "That man doesn't need to lie to us. Those four mysterious guys are no match for him. If he wants to hurt us, we can't resist at all." Well, let's go to the place," he said. The second sister finally agreed, and then patted the third sister's head. "Don't think too much. He is not Mr. Poulin, you are wrong." "Is that so?" The third sister couldn't help but show a puzzled expression. She looked at her eldest sister and found that her eldest sister also nodded. She couldn't help but rub her head, wondering if she was wrong. "Then, let's go now." The eldest sister made a prompt decision. "There is another guy who escaped. I don't know if he will come back. We can't stay here anymore." "Wait," the third sister hurriedly said. I want to leave a message for Mr. Poulin, saying that we are leaving here. After all, he has taken care of us for so long." "Well, but hurry up." The eldest sister was soft-hearted and agreed. Looking at the small stone carving a picture on the reef, the eldest sister and the second sister suddenly looked at each other. The second sister whispered, "Eldest sister, actually, I also saw." The eldest sister shook her head, reached out and covered the second sister's mouth, and said seriously, "You are all wrong." Soon after, the three sirens dived into the sea. They would go through a long journey and finally go to a mysterious place, the depths of the sea. Under the waves, under a cliff at the edge of the sea, a figure fled into the cave at the bottom of the cliff. Mayor Lotta gasped for breath, recalling that horrible scene, and his heart couldn't help beating fast. Suddenly, he touched the gray crystal hidden in his clothes, the tool given by the god of darkness to find the final weapon, Pluto. At this moment, inside the gray crystal, a trace of starlight suddenly lit up. The crystal reacted. Could it be? Mayor Lotta frowned. Is it? In a room that was airtight, a man in a black suit sat quietly on a chair in front of the fireplace. He closed his eyes and seemed to have fallen asleep. Suddenly, a very slight sound came from the room. It turned out to be a black cat that had come in from somewhere. The black cat gently jumped into the man's arms. Lying there, it also fell asleep quietly.